You believe you're making a choice, but how would you know? Imagine this: you reach for a glass of water. It's a simple, everyday action. You tell yourself you were thirsty, and so naturally you drank. But what if your brain had already decided milliseconds before you felt the urge? What if the command to act came first, and the sensation of deciding was just a delayed narrative, your consciousness backfilling the story to make sense of it? That's not science fiction. That's neuroscience. In the 1980s, a researcher named Benjamin Libet attached electrodes to the scalps of volunteers and asked them to perform a simple task: flex their wrist whenever they felt like it. What he found shattered centuries of philosophical belief. Brain activity, what's called a readiness potential, occurred hundreds of milliseconds before the subject consciously decided to move. In other words, the brain acted before the mind thought. Choice, as we understand it, might be a trick. Now pause and sit with that, because the implications run deeper than you think. If your brain is making decisions before you're aware of them, are you really in control? Is free will a myth, carefully constructed by your own mind to preserve the illusion of agency? And if that's true, what does that make you? We like to believe we are authors of our actions, that every choice we make is weighed, considered, and ultimately ours. But what if we're just witnesses, narrators, trying to make sense of a story that's already been written inside us? There's more. In recent studies using brain scans, researchers have been able to predict a person's decision several seconds before they themselves knew it. The data suggests that your conscious mind is the last to know what's happening. That means by the time you feel like you're deciding, you're already following orders. Quiet, internal orders you never heard being given. So what do we do with this knowledge? One reaction is terror. If we aren't choosing, then what is the self? What's the difference between you and a very complex puppet? One that simply can't see the strings. But there's another reaction, too: curiosity. What if consciousness isn't about making choices, but making meaning? What if the stories we tell ourselves after the fact are the real power, not the decision, but the interpretation? Still, the unsettling truth remains: even your interpretation might not be your own. Because every why you construct comes from a web of past experiences, social conditioning, biological impulses. Your thoughts have roots you didn't plant. You didn't choose your genetics. You didn't choose your childhood. You didn't choose your culture, your traumas, or your language. And yet every choice you make grows from this soil. Free will, then, may not be freedom at all. It may be a series of reactions, well-dressed, neatly explained, and deeply rehearsed. So next time you feel certain that you're deciding, that you're choosing freely, pause, ask yourself, was this your idea, or just the latest echo in a long chain of causes? And if you can't tell, are you sure you've ever made a choice at all? You think you're the driver, but maybe you're the passenger. Maybe your job is just to grip the wheel and believe it matters. You've always told yourself you're in control, but maybe that story is the only thing holding you together. And once you stop believing it, what happens then? Because when you no longer trust your choices, you no longer trust yourself. And when you stop trusting yourself, you become the perfect subject. Someone else can choose for you. You'll follow, thinking it was your idea all along. You're more vulnerable than you think. You're easier to lead than you'd ever dare admit. And that's exactly what they're counting on. You feel the pressure building now, don't you? The uncertainty, the need for something solid to hold on to. But what if what comes next only deepens the cracks? What if your own obedience is the next thing to unravel? Imagine being told to hurt a complete stranger, not just theoretically, not metaphorically, but physically, directly. You're in a lab, standing behind a machine. You're told to press a button. Every time you do, someone in another room screams in pain. Louder each time. You can hear it. You can feel it. The voice begs, pleads, cries out for mercy. And yet, most people kept pressing the button. This isn't fiction. This was real. It was called the Milgram experiment. In 1961, Stanley Milgram, a Yale psychologist, designed what would become one of the most chilling studies in human obedience ever conducted. Volunteers believed they were helping with a study on memory and learning. They were assigned the role of a teacher. Their task, to administer increasingly powerful electric shocks to a learner each time they answered a question incorrectly. What they didn't know was that the learner was an actor. The shocks weren't real, but the reactions, the choices, the obedience, those were horrifyingly authentic. At 75 volts, the learner grunts. At 120, he cries out. By 150 volts, he's screaming, demanding to be released. At 300, he refuses to answer, silent in protest. Then, nothing. Silence, perhaps unconscious or worse. And still, the authority figure in a white lab coat insists, calmly but firmly, the experiment requires that you continue. And they did. Nearly 2/3 of participants went all the way to 450 volts, the maximum, the highest setting, marked ominously, XXX, fully aware they could be killing someone. They weren't psychopaths. They weren't sadists. They were ordinary people. People who went to work, paid taxes, hugged their children. So why did they obey? Because an authority told them to. Because the person next to them wore a lab coat. Because the room looked official. Because disobedience felt more dangerous than inflicting pain. This experiment shattered every comforting assumption we had about human morality. That good people wouldn't harm others. That empathy would override instruction. That our conscience is stronger than pressure. It isn't. Milgram didn't prove people are evil. He proved something far worse. They're malleable, vulnerable, programmed by culture to trust authority more than their own instincts. And when caught in structured systems, schools, workplaces, governments, we do what we're told, even when it violates every part of who we think we are. What made it worse? The language. Participants weren't told to hurt or kill. They were told to increase voltage. The pain was sanitized, hidden behind switches and dials, dehumanized. This is how atrocities happen. Not in wild acts of hatred, but in small incremental decisions made by people who believe they're just doing their job. Filling out paperwork, following orders, keeping things running. And that's what makes it so terrifying. Because it means the potential for cruelty lives in all of us, not as monsters, but as obedient citizens. We like to think we'd refuse, that we'd be the ones who stood up. But statistically, you probably wouldn't. You'd sit there, fidgeting, sweating, but pressing that button anyway, because obedience is comfortable. Disobedience is dangerous. At least that's what we're taught. But here's the real horror. Many participants, after the experiment, were visibly shaken. Some cried, others trembled. They weren't heartless. They were traumatized by their own compliance. And yet, even after seeing what they'd done, most still justified it. I was just following instructions. I thought the man in charge knew what he was doing. I didn't have a choice. This reveals something deeper than obedience. It reveals how easily we rewrite our own actions to protect our identity. How the mind bends reality to avoid guilt. How morality isn't a shield, it's a story we tell ourselves after the fact. And if you're wondering why any of this matters today, just look around. Look at the bureaucrat who enforces unjust policies. The employee who executes orders they don't agree with. The officer who says, "I was just doing my job." Look at yourself every time you silence a gut instinct because someone else seems to know better. Every time you obey to avoid confrontation. Every time you follow rules that feel wrong, but you don't speak up. Milgram's experiment didn't end in 1961. It happens every day, and unless we recognize the quiet horror of obedience, not the loud evil, but the soft compliance, we'll keep pressing that button. Again and again and again. You might think the real threat is cruelty, but history suggests something more dangerous. The kind that doesn't look evil. The kind that doesn't feel wrong. The kind that happens in ordinary rooms with ordinary people just like you. You're more controlled than you realize. And what's even scarier, you might be the one doing the controlling and not even know it. You're only starting to feel it now. The chill that comes when you realize your thoughts aren't as private, your choices not as free as you believed. And what happens next will make that loss of control feel even more personal. You make decisions every day. What to wear, what to eat, who to trust. And every time it feels like you're in control, like your thoughts come first and then your actions follow. But what if that's a lie? What if your brain decides before you do? This isn't a philosophical thought experiment. It's science. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted a study that still rattles the foundation of free will. Participants were asked to perform a simple action, press a button whenever they felt like it. While they did this, Libet measured their brain activity. Here's where it gets disturbing. Before the participants consciously decided to press the button, their brain had already initiated the action. About 350 milliseconds before they became aware of their own choice, the brain had fired the starting signal. In other words, the brain moved before the mind even knew it wanted to. Think about what that means. You believe you're the author of your actions. But according to this, you're more like the narrator explaining decisions that have already been made. Your conscious mind is less a commander and more a commentator. It gets worse. Later studies showed this readiness potential could be detected up to 7 seconds before a person made a decision. 7 seconds. That's an eternity in brain time. Enough for your subconscious to choose, plan, and prepare, while your conscious self is still fumbling through the illusion of agency. You're not choosing, you're rationalizing. Your brain hands you a decision, and your mind backfills the justification. I picked chocolate because I love the taste. No, you picked chocolate because your neurons fired a signal shaped by habit, memory, and craving, and you invented the reason afterward. This isn't just about buttons or ice cream. This is about morality, judgment, identity. If your brain is running the show before you're even aware of it, how do you punish someone for a crime? How do you praise someone for a good deed? Where does accountability live when the driver isn't conscious choice, but unconscious wiring? You start to see how fragile the idea of responsibility becomes. Think of the implications in a courtroom. A defendant claims they couldn't help themselves, that their brain was wired to react a certain way. Are they lying? Or are they just one more human trapped inside a machine that moves faster than their awareness? The legal system assumes intent, but neuroscience suggests intent might be a postscript. Even in your daily life, the cracks in free will are everywhere. You reach for your phone without thinking. You react defensively in an argument before you've even processed the words. You make split-second decisions in traffic that feel like instinct because they are. And those instincts aren't random. They're formed by years of experiences you didn't choose, genetics you didn't pick, environments you didn't control. So who's really responsible? You, or the neural architecture that built you. The truth is deeply unsettling. You're not steering the ship, you're riding in it, sometimes gripping the wheel, but never really determining the course. And yet, you feel in control. That's the genius of the system. Your mind gets just enough illusion of authorship to keep you sane, to keep you motivated, to keep you functioning in a world that demands accountability, even if neuroscience quietly erases it. You still believe in free will because you have to, because without it, guilt collapses. Morality fades, achievement becomes meaningless, and self becomes a ghost. But beneath all of that, beneath your routines, your decisions, your beliefs, is a brain moving faster than you, choosing before you know, pushing before you're ready, and justifying after the fact. You think you're in charge, but your brain knows better. And now that you know that too, the question isn't, do you have free will? The real question is, can you ever look at yourself the same way again? Maybe the scariest part isn't losing control, but realizing you never had it. You want answers, clarity, a way to make peace with this. But something's still crawling under your skin, isn't it? You're being watched, not by a person, but by the part of you that's always watching, and it's about to slow everything down. You're walking down a hallway. The lighting is sterile, the walls blank, the floor perfectly tiled. There's nothing remarkable about this space until you notice the camera. It's perched in the corner, barely noticeable, but once you see it, you feel it. Your posture straightens. Your pace adjusts. You become aware of your face, your hands, your every movement. You're being watched. And whether you know it or not, your brain just stepped into a different timeline. Because time behaves differently when you're under observation, not metaphorically, literally. Studies show that people perceive time as passing more slowly when they believe they're being watched. It's not a feeling, it's a distortion. Measurable, replicable, real. But why? Because your brain isn't a clock, it's a prediction machine. And when it detects a watcher, it shifts into high alert, tracking every detail of your behavior, your environment, your internal state. Hyper-awareness kicks in. And with hyper-awareness comes hyper-recording. You're not living the moment, you're analyzing it. Imagine walking alone down a street at night. Now imagine a stranger begins following you. Same steps, same pace. But everything changes. Your brain catalogues every sound, every movement. Seconds feel like minutes. The street stretches longer, the shadows grow deeper. It's the same principle. Being watched triggers surveillance mode. Your mind starts capturing more data per second, more emotional feedback, more self-monitoring. And the more your brain records, the longer the moment feels in retrospect. Like dragging a single second into a slow-motion reel. You don't just feel watched, you feel dissected. But the distortion of time isn't just a product of anxiety, it's also a product of performance. Think back to public speaking. Standing on a stage, every eye fixed on you. That 5-minute speech feels like an hour. Your heart races, not because you're afraid of the audience, but because you're performing under scrutiny. Your identity is under review, and every moment becomes weighty with implication. Time slows down when being watched, because being watched turns existence into evaluation. And that's where it gets darker. Surveillance, whether by people, systems, or even perceived watchers, doesn't just bend your sense of time. It alters your behavior, your choices, your very sense of self. You begin editing your personality for the audience, real or imagined. You don't just live, you perform. And the longer you're observed, the harder it becomes to tell the difference between the actor and the self. Consider this. In studies, people under constant camera surveillance report higher levels of stress, increased paranoia, and a persistent feeling of inauthenticity. They begin to lose track of what they would have done if nobody was watching. The observer becomes the scriptwriter, and you become the character. This is why surveillance societies don't need to be violent to control people. They don't need to arrest you to suppress you. They just need to watch, constantly, or make you believe you're being watched. Because the effect is the same. Your sense of freedom warps. Your concept of time fractures, and slowly, invisibly, you become complicit in your own control. Even in your personal life, this dynamic plays out. Social media is a voluntary surveillance system. You curate your life, knowing others will see it. You filter your joy, your grief, your daily moments. You perform happiness. You perform outrage. You perform authenticity. And over time, performance becomes reality. You forget what unobserved life even feels like. So ask yourself this: how much of your life is truly yours? How much of your time has passed slowly, painfully, not because of boredom, but because someone was watching? And the scariest part, it works even when no one is there. Just the idea of being watched, just the whisper of observation, is enough to distort your reality. Your mind doesn't need proof, just the possibility. The camera doesn't even need to be on. And so you live a life slowed down by the weight of invisible eyes, stretched, distorted, self-conscious. Not because time changed, but because you did. You became the watched. And once that happens, there is no such thing as a natural moment again. Your sense of time, your most basic experience of existence, is no longer yours. You've outsourced it to the gaze of others. You live in slow motion, not because the world slowed down, but because someone might be watching. You should ask yourself one last question. Who are you when no one's looking? And what happens if you never find out? You think that was uncomfortable. You're about to discover something even worse, sometimes. The memories you cling to never even happened. Imagine this: you and your siblings are sitting around the dinner table, swapping stories from childhood. Someone brings up a memory, say that family vacation to the Grand Canyon. You laugh, you nod, you even recall the heat, the smell of the desert, the ice cream truck at the visitor center. But here's the twist: you never went. That trip never happened. And yet, you remember it vividly. Why? This isn't a glitch in your memory. This is how memory actually works. And it's far more fragile and terrifying than we've been led to believe. Memory is not a recording. We like to think of memory as a hard drive. You experience something, store it away, and retrieve it later. Simple, logical, wrong. Memory is not stored. It's reconstructed. Each time you remember, your brain is rebuilding the event from scattered fragments. Like a painter recreating a scene from vague sketches and emotion. Every time you recall it, you're not pulling up a file, you're rewriting it. So if someone plants even a small detail, say a red car that wasn't there, your brain might accept it, adopt it. Next time, the red car is there in your version of the story. And after a few retellings, it's always been there. The red car becomes real. The Mandela effect. This is where things get really strange. You remember the Monopoly man, right? Top hat, cane, monocle, there never was. Or maybe you recall Berenstain Bears with an E. It's always been Berenstain with an E. These aren't just typos. Millions of people insist they remember it the other way. Identical false memories shared across populations. How? Some blame parallel universes. Others claim timeline shifts. But the psychological explanation is even creepier. Your brain doesn't just misremember. It creates consensus. When enough people believe in the same falsehood, the illusion solidifies. It feels real. It becomes real. We don't remember the truth. We remember the story. And it's not just names or logos. Entire crimes, traumas, and personal histories can be fabricated and believed under the right circumstances. In one infamous study, researchers convinced people they had been lost in a mall as a child. It never happened, but with just a few suggestive interviews, the participants began to recall vivid details. The smell of the pretzel stand, the panic, a kind stranger, all fiction, all utterly believed. Why does this work? Because memory isn't driven by accuracy, it's driven by narrative. Your brain wants coherence, not truth. It stitches details together into a story that feels emotionally satisfying. The more compelling the story, the more real it feels, even if it never happened. Emotion is the editor. Have you ever noticed how your most vivid memories are tied to intense emotion? That breakup, that car crash, that one perfect night. Emotion strengthens memory, but it also distorts it. It exaggerates, omits, dramatizes. The more emotionally charged an event is, the more likely it is to be remembered inaccurately. This is why eyewitness testimony is so unreliable. People aren't lying, they're misremembering. Their fear, confusion, or adrenaline reshape the memory into something that felt right. And now, that version is all they have. The brain fills in the gaps. Your mind hates blanks. If part of a memory is missing, your brain improvises. It fills the silence with something that might have happened. A guess, a logical patch, and the scary part. You can't tell the difference. The guess feels just as real as the truth. This is why false memories aren't obvious errors. They're seamless, convincing, indistinguishable from actual experiences. And once planted, they're nearly impossible to remove. The self is built on fiction. Now think about this. Your personality, your values, your identity, they're all shaped by your memories. Who you think you are is a story built from past experiences. But if those experiences are flawed, if some never even happened, then who exactly are you? If one lie in your memory can shift your sense of self, how stable is your identity? How real is your past? Maybe the version of you that you believe in is just an echo of stories you've told yourself. Or worse, stories someone else planted in your mind. Because if you can remember things that never happened, then you can become someone who never existed. Memory isn't just unreliable, it's dangerous. It's the invisible architect of your reality, and it doesn't care about truth. It cares about coherence. And that means your entire life story might be a beautifully constructed hallucination. You think you remember, but what if you're just dreaming with your eyes open? And if your memories can betray you so easily, what else are you trusting that isn't real? You'll want to hold on to something for what comes next. Because the mind we think we know, it's about to split in two. Have you ever met someone who literally disagrees with themselves? Not metaphorically, not in the way we all second-guess or contradict ourselves. I mean, one part of their brain wants one thing, while the other wants something entirely different. One hand reaches for the shirt, the other pushes it away. One voice says yes, and another silently screams no. No metaphor, just war inside one skull. This is the reality of split brain patients. Their brains have been surgically divided, and the results? They shatter everything you thought you knew about consciousness. Let's begin with the surgery. It's called a corpus callosotomy. It severs the bridge, the corpus callosum, that normally connects the left and right hemispheres of your brain. Doctors do this to treat severe epilepsy, but the unintended side effects are far stranger than the seizures ever were. Because now, The two halves of the brain can no longer talk to each other. And what that reveals is terrifying. Your sense of self, your I, isn't a single thing. It's a fragile truce between two rival empires. Let's break that down. The left hemisphere is usually dominant for language. It's the storyteller. It spins narratives, makes excuses, fills in gaps. The right hemisphere, on the other hand, is more visual, spatial, and emotionally attuned. When the bridge is severed, they no longer coordinate. Each one starts operating as its own isolated mind. In one experiment, researchers flashed the word KE to the left visual field, which only the right brain can process, and asked the patient what they saw. The verbal left brain, cut off from that input, said nothing. But then the patient's left hand, the one controlled by the right brain, reached out and picked up a key. Think about that. One part of the brain had no idea what was going on, while the other part responded perfectly. Now imagine living like that, where your hands, eyes, and voice might not agree, where you're constantly surprised by your own actions. Some patients post-surgery have tried to dress themselves, only to have one hand undo what the other just did. One hand pulls up the zipper, the other pulls it back down. One picks the shirt, the other throws it away. It's not clumsiness, it's civil war, but it gets worse. In certain cases, researchers ask the right hemisphere, unable to speak, to select an image with the left hand that matched an emotional response. Then they ask the left hemisphere, capable of speech, why they picked that image. And here's the twist: it didn't say "I don't know," it made up a reason. Every time. The left brain fabricated a rational story, completely unaware that it was lying. It wasn't trying to deceive anyone. It just couldn't tolerate gaps in the narrative. So it invented one. Let that sink in. The storytelling part of your brain would rather lie than admit it doesn't know something. Your consciousness isn't just divided, it's delusional. These experiments force a chilling question. Is your sense of self just a convenient illusion? A patchwork of justifications and instincts, wrapped in a smooth, confident voice? Split-brain patients show us what happens when the illusion breaks. When the narrator can no longer access the footage. When the actor keeps performing, unaware the script has changed. It makes you wonder, how unified are you really? You feel whole, consistent, singular. But maybe that's the trick. Maybe your brain is constantly negotiating behind the scenes, hiding its chaos with polished language and seamless edits. Maybe consciousness isn't a spotlight. Maybe it's a PR team, spinning stories to make you feel like you're in control. And here's the real horror: if your brain can function as two separate minds, what does that make you? A committee? A collage? A lie? When one half of the brain can be happy, while the other is sad, when one hand can build while the other destroys, how can you say you are one person? What does identity even mean when your own mind can't agree on what it's doing? And what happens when you start to notice the cracks? That creeping sense that part of you is acting without permission. That flicker of doubt. Why did I do that? That moment where your mouth moves before you think, where your hand signs a name you don't remember choosing. Maybe those aren't accidents. Maybe they're glimpses, flickers of another you, still inside, still fighting for control, still trying to be heard. You think you're the captain of this ship, but what if you're just the radio? Here's where it all starts to spiral. If the brain can house multiple selves, then what is free will? What is morality? What does it mean to take responsibility for something? If another you, silent and wordless, did it? Split brain patients don't just challenge our understanding of neuroscience, they challenge the very idea of a person. And if they've taught us anything, it's this: The mind is not a monolith, it's a battlefield. You just rarely see the war. But when the bridge collapses, the masks fall, and what's left is a haunting truth. You are not alone in your own head. There's another you, staring back, confused, silent, and just as real. The most terrifying part. You'll never get to meet them. They're trapped inside the same skull, and they might not like you very much. If even your own brain can deceive itself, just imagine what happens when your eyes begin to play the same trick. Keep going. You need to see what your vision is hiding from you. Imagine walking into a dark room. You flip the switch, and suddenly the space is bathed in light. But here's the unsettling question. How much of that room did you actually see? Your eyes scanned it, sure, but did they see everything, or just enough for your brain to build the illusion of completeness? Your brain is a master forger, and your eyes, they're just its unreliable messengers. Your vision isn't a window, it's a reconstruction. Most people think seeing is simple. Light enters the eyes, and voila, reality. But that's not how it works. Your brain doesn't just passively receive visual data. It actively interprets it, edits it, fills in gaps, and smooths over inconsistencies. It's not showing you the world as it is, it's showing you a guess, a high-resolution hallucination. Take the blind spot in each eye, where the optic nerve meets the retina. There are no light receptors. It's a literal hole in your vision, but you don't notice it. Why? Because your brain fills it in, perfectly, automatically, without your permission. You're already hallucinating and calling it sight. Now imagine what else it's filling in. Every second, your eyes make rapid jumps, saccades darting from one focal point to another. During each jump, you're effectively blind, but your brain stitches these blind moments together into a seamless movie. It smooths over the chaos so convincingly that you never notice the missing frames. Like a corrupt film editor who cuts corners but still gets standing ovations. And when something doesn't make sense, your brain rewrites it. You don't see what's there, you see what should be there. Familiar shapes, expected shadows, socially programmed patterns. This is why people swear they saw a face in the fog or a figure in the darkness. Your brain hates uncertainty, so it invents clarity, and you believe it. Think about optical illusions. They don't just trick your eyes, they expose your brain's assumptions. The spinning dancer that changes direction. The dress that's blue and black, or is it white and gold? These aren't minor quirks. They're proof that perception isn't objective. It's context dependent. It's suggestible. It's fragile. Now take it further. What happens when you expect to see something? Studies show your brain often shows it to you, even if it's not there. You literally hallucinate expected outcomes. This isn't a bug. It's how your vision works. You're not seeing reality. You're seeing a prediction. And that prediction, it's based on past experiences, cultural cues, fears, desires, and social conditioning. Your brain is less a camera and more a painter, one obsessed with shortcuts. Consider how you perceive people. One glance, and your brain races to fill in their backstory, age, intention, threat level, trustworthiness. You don't just see their face, you see a narrative stitched together by memory and bias. What if the face you see isn't the face that's there? Even memory fails here. You're not recalling visual truth, you're recalling the last version of the story your brain decided was true. You could swear someone's eyes were green, but they were brown. You could bet your life they were smiling, but they weren't. And the terrifying part, you'd pass a lie detector test. Because you're not lying, your eyes did, and your brain made sure you never noticed. So what does this mean? It means that your perception of the world, your reality, isn't as solid as you think. It's more like a simulation, patched together with duct tape and guesswork. And yet you trust it completely. You base your decisions on it. Your morality, your relationships, your sense of self. But if your eyes can lie, and your brain just rolls with it, then what else are you wrong about? What other illusions are you living in? And how would you even know? You wouldn't. That's the final trick. The system that deceives you is the same system that convinces you you're not being deceived. Because if your brain fills in the visual gaps, why not the emotional ones? The moral ones? The existential ones? You don't just see what you want to see, you see what you need to see, just enough to function, just enough to survive, but never enough to understand what's really there. Maybe that's the scariest part. You're not just seeing the world wrong, you're seeing yourself wrong too. And by the time you realize that, it's already been filled in. You've already accepted the lie. You've already looked and seen nothing at all. You trust your eyes, but they've never earned it. You believe your perception is truth, but it's just scaffolding. So what happens when the illusion collapses? You better hope you're ready to see what's really there, because once you know your eyes lie, you'll never see the same again. And once you see through the lie, you can't unsee it. You're not watching reality, you're watching your brain fake it. So what are you going to do about that? Because you've been living in this illusion your entire life, and the cracks are only getting bigger. You think it's just your eyes. Just wait. You'll see what happens when two identical faces no longer look the same, and then it gets even worse. You walk into a room and see two people. Same height, same bone structure, same eye color, skin tone, even the same smile. You're told they're identical, twins perhaps, clones, duplicates in every physical sense. But something feels off. You stare at their faces side by side and your brain rebels. Despite the data, despite knowing they're identical, you start seeing differences. One seems more confident, the other colder. You might think one looks kinder or smarter or more trustworthy, but none of that is real. What you're experiencing is a cognitive illusion, your mind projecting internal narratives onto external symmetry. You're reading into the faces things that aren't there, inventing differences that don't exist. Why? Because your brain needs to. The human brain is wired for contrast. It doesn't just process what it sees, it fills in the blanks, imposes meaning, interprets shadows, intentions and emotions, especially with faces. Our brains are hyper-tuned to social cues. So when it sees two identical faces, it goes into overdrive, trying to find what isn't there. But here's the catch. It's not just about what you see, it's about what you feel. A famous experiment proved this unsettling quirk. Researchers showed participants a lineup of identical faces and asked them to rate personality traits. Not only did participants insist they could see differences, they formed emotional attachments or aversions based purely on phantom traits. One face looked more aggressive, another more naive. Same face, same features, different emotional reactions. And this gets creepier. Swap the context. Take those identical faces and tell the viewer that one committed a crime and the other didn't. Suddenly, the guilty face looks more sinister, more shifty. People are more likely to remember it as unattractive or untrustworthy, even though it's exactly the same as the innocent one. Your brain isn't just seeing, it's judging, inventing, rewriting. This illusion is called the perceptual bias of social context. In simple terms, once you think you know something about someone, you literally see them differently, not metaphorically, neurologically. Your perception of identity is deeply tied to your expectations. And once those expectations take root, even perfect visual replication can't override them. Your brain clings to meaning, even when reality offers none. Think about what that means in your daily life. How many people have you misjudged based on your first impression of their face? How often have you projected kindness or danger, competence or ignorance, beauty or ugliness onto someone based on facial patterns you don't even consciously recognize? It's not just a mistake, it's a built-in flaw. This illusion reveals something unsettling. You don't see people as they are. You see them as your mind needs them to be. Familiar, categorized, interpretable. And when reality resists that interpretation, your brain edits it. So the two identical faces, they don't just look different, they are different. To you, because your brain demands it. And this leads to a darker truth. If you can look at two identical human faces and invent differences, what does that say about your perception of race, of class, of gender, of beauty? How many of your snap judgments are based not on fact, but on subconscious stories you were never even aware you were telling? Worse yet, how many of those stories have shaped your behavior? You think you're objective. You think you just get a feeling about someone. But that feeling is a fabrication, an echo chamber of old experiences, cultural programming, and buried fears. You don't just lie to yourself, you see lies. So now, imagine this. You're shown your own face, twice, side by side. One labeled successful, the other failure. You know it's you, same lighting, same expression, but you hesitate. One of them looks sadder, the other more proud, but it's you. And just like that, the illusion breaks something deeper. Because if your own face, unchanged and mirrored, can provoke emotional dissonance based on nothing but a label, what does that say about your sense of self? About the stories you tell yourself in the mirror each day? Maybe you've never seen yourself clearly at all. Maybe none of us have. You never saw the truth. You just saw what you needed to believe. And now it's too late to unsee it. You felt something shift, didn't you? That quiet instability, that creeping realization that even your eyes can't be trusted. Keep watching, because what happens next will make you question whether you've ever tasted anything honestly in your life. You walk into a lab, you're handed 2 cups. Same drink, same temperature, same quantity. One cup is plain. The other has a brand logo you recognize, a premium label, sleek and confident. You take a sip from the first, then the second. You swear the branded one tastes better, richer, more refined. But here's the twist. They are exactly the same. No difference. Except the story wrapped around it. Welcome to the placebo effect of prestige. This isn't a fluke. It's been tested repeatedly. In one famous study, participants drank the same wine poured into bottles, labeled with different price tags. The more expensive the label, the more their brains lit up in pleasure centers. They weren't lying. Their brains genuinely experienced more enjoyment. Not because the wine changed, but because they did. The label became a suggestion, a psychological script, and your brain, it follows the script without question. Now imagine how often this happens in your daily life. The clothes you wear, the restaurants you visit, the phones you buy, each choice draped in assumptions. Price equals quality. Fame equals value. Branding isn't decoration, it's manipulation. It doesn't just shape your opinion, it rewires your experience. But it gets worse, because you don't just perceive things differently, you trust them differently. A generic painkiller relieves your headache, but slap a big-name brand on it, and suddenly it's more effective. Even if it's the exact same chemical compound, your body responds differently, because belief is that powerful. Branding isn't just about preference. It's a subtle form of hypnosis. This is where reality begins to split. You're not just choosing based on fact. You're choosing based on an illusion your brain wants to believe. Prestige triggers dopamine. Familiarity lowers anxiety. Popularity signals safety. So the logo becomes a shortcut for trust, pleasure, even meaning. And now we have to ask the darker question. If your senses can be hijacked this easily, how much of your reality is built on deception? Think about it. You're told a product is exclusive, so you value it more. You're told a brand is premium, so you treat it like gold. But those words exclusive, premium, artisanal, gourmet, they're not objective truths. They're carefully engineered suggestions, crafted to bypass logic and trigger emotion. You don't evaluate quality, you absorb belief, and belief is sticky. You'll defend that belief. You'll argue that one shoe is more comfortable than another. One water tastes crisper, one car drives smoother, when statistically, physically, chemically, there is no measurable difference. The difference is in the narrative, the branding, the illusion you didn't even know you bought into. This is why advertising works, not because it changes what a product is, but because it changes who you are when you interact with it. It makes you want to believe. It turns products into identities, purchases into status, consumption into morality. You start to think the coffee you drink says something about your ethics, your fashion about your intelligence, your technology about your future. All of it, layered with meaning that never came from the product, but from the branding plastered on top. The drink tastes better because you're being told it should. But now, the implications run even deeper. Because if branding can do this to a soda or a sneaker, what about people, ideas, institutions? A person with a title, a politician with a slogan, a belief system with a logo. What if the reason something feels right isn't because it is right, but because it came in familiar packaging? What if the way you trust, admire, even love, is just another brand effect? Ask yourself, when you feel impressed, moved, persuaded, are you responding to the truth or just the packaging? When everything is a brand, authenticity becomes a ghost. And the worst part? You want the illusion. You need it. Because stripping away the labels would mean facing a terrifying world where nothing is special and no one is above the rest. A world where your pleasure isn't sacred. It's programmable. And that means you are programmable. Maybe the drink never changed, but you did. Your mind molded itself around a symbol. It built a richer world because it was told it could. And now it prefers the lie. So next time something tastes better, feels better, seems better, ask yourself this: is it actually better, or were you just branded? You've trusted the packaging your whole life. But what happens when the label is peeled off? What's left? You won't like the answer, but it's already inside you. You've been drinking it for years, and you've loved every drop. You think you're making a choice, but you're really following a script. And that script was written by someone who wants you predictable. Stay with me, because if branding can hijack pleasure, just wait until you see how far people will go to avoid pain. Have you ever watched someone agree to something they clearly didn't believe just to keep the peace? Not because they were confused, not because they changed their mind, but because silence was safer than truth. This is where the human mind becomes its own prison. Think back to the famous Asch conformity experiments. A group of people is shown a line and then asked to choose the matching length from 3 options. It's a simple task until everyone in the group starts giving the same obviously wrong answer. You're the last to go. You know they're wrong. You see it, you feel it, and yet you hesitate. Do you go along with them, or do you speak up? Over and over, people chose the lie. They pointed to the wrong line, parroting the group's answer. Not because they couldn't see the truth, but because they didn't want to stand out. They knew black was black, but they said it was white, And just like that, a fact becomes negotiable, not through evidence or argument, but through social pressure alone. The fear isn't being wrong, it's being alone in being right. Imagine how dangerous that is. When your brain prioritizes belonging over reality, truth becomes a casualty of consensus. You learn to betray your own eyes if enough people around you insist otherwise, because the cost of conflict feels too high. We call it keeping the peace. But what peace are we really keeping? It's not internal peace. It's not moral peace. It's a fragile external harmony purchased with your silence, your compliance, and your slow erosion of self-respect. You stop saying what you think, then you stop thinking it altogether. And this doesn't just happen in psychological labs. It happens in boardrooms, classrooms, families, and friend groups. Someone makes a racist joke. No one laughs, but no one says anything either. A dangerous idea gains traction. No one agrees, but no one pushes back. Slowly, discomfort becomes conformity. And then conformity becomes belief. Not because people are evil, but because they're scared. We're social creatures, hardwired to survive in groups. And in a primitive brain, rejection equals death. That wiring hasn't evolved fast enough to adapt to modern life, where speaking the truth might cost you a job, a relationship, or your reputation, but not your life. Yet the fear feels just as primal, just as blinding. So we rationalize. It's not the time. It's not my place. Someone else will say it. But with every compromise, your tolerance for dissonance grows. What once felt absurd now feels normal. The lines blur. The lie becomes a lifestyle. And here's where it gets darker. Once you lie to fit in, you need the lie to be true. Not just for others, but for yourself. Otherwise, the discomfort is unbearable. So you convince yourself it wasn't a big deal. That maybe they were right. That maybe black is white, after all. The group didn't just change your words, they changed your mind. This is how reality gets rewritten, not by tyrants, but by tiny concessions. And once you've compromised, once it gets easier the next time. Until truth isn't a fixed point anymore. It's a mood, a vibe, a negotiation. The real world doesn't ask if you're right. It asks if you're agreeable. And often, being agreeable means betraying what you know is true. That's the real danger. Not the lie itself, but the surrender that follows, and what makes it so terrifying is that it's invisible while it's happening. You won't feel yourself slipping. You'll think you're being polite, mature, reasonable. But beneath that calm exterior, you're losing grip on your own voice. Eventually, you forget how to disagree at all. And if you don't catch it in time, you'll wake up one day, unable to tell the difference between what you believe and what you say, because they've become the same thing. Not from conviction, but from fear. And fear, when disguised as harmony, is the most effective silencer of all. You want to know what truth costs. Sometimes everything. But you should ask a harder question. What does avoiding it cost you? Because in the end, saying black is white won't protect you from conflict. It just ensures the only person you're ever at war with is yourself. And the longer you keep the peace with others, the deeper the war within becomes. But if you stay quiet now, you'll never know what your voice was really capable of. So maybe the question isn't, should I speak up? Maybe it's what will happen to me if I don't. You already know the answer. That's why you feel this uncomfortable. Because truth, once seen, can't be unseen. And pretending otherwise won't save you. It will just bury you. You don't have to be loud, but you do have to be honest. Especially when no one else is. Especially when they all say black is white. And especially when you're the only one left who remembers the difference. You feel it, don't you? That edge creeping closer, not out there, but inside you. Stay with it. Because what comes next, you've felt before, but never this clearly. Imagine watching someone scream in pain. You don't know them. You're not sure what happened. But they clutch their side, drop to their knees, and cry out like they've been stabbed. Your chest tightens. Your muscles tense. You almost feel it yourself. Now imagine they're acting. Same scream, same expressions, same desperation in their voice. But this time, it's not real. They're performing. Here's the problem. Your brain doesn't know the difference. When it sees pain, real or fake, it reacts the same. Your heart rate increases. Your pupils dilate. Mirror neurons fire off, simulating their agony in your body. Because biologically, emotionally, psychologically, you are wired to assume pain is real, to feel it, even when it isn't. That's where things start to get dangerous. The brain's empathy circuits aren't selective. They evolved for survival, not accuracy. In prehistoric tribes, ignoring someone's pain could be fatal for the group. So your brain developed a bias, believe first, question later. But now, that bias makes you vulnerable. Think about courtroom testimonies. A tearful witness, a trembling voice, a well-timed sob. Jurors cry with them. They feel their story, not because it's verified, but because it sounds true, looks true, feels true. People have been imprisoned or set free based on performances of pain, because even trained professionals struggle to tell the difference. Research shows that even experienced judges and police officers often can't distinguish real suffering from acting. Not because they're careless, but because the system they're using, the human brain, isn't built for it. The same problem infects relationships. You've probably been manipulated by someone weaponizing pain. A guilt trip, a dramatic breakdown, a strategic silence that says, "Look what you've done." And in that moment, you doubt yourself. You question your own perception. You scramble to fix it. Because pain, real or fake, demands action. And here's the worst part. They might not even know they're faking. Psychologists have studied something called somatization, when emotional distress shows up as physical pain. People genuinely believe they're suffering, even when nothing is medically wrong. Their bodies ache, their stomachs twist, their breathing tightens, and they're not lying, not consciously, but the source isn't physical, it's psychological. Emotional pain that slips into the body, wearing a mask of injury. So what do you do with that? What happens when even the person in pain can't tell if it's real? It means society's systems of fairness, courts, hospitals, even friendships are built on sand. They depend on something that can't be reliably measured. Pain is subjective, invisible, and yet we use it to justify everything from sentencing decisions to social support. Fake pain gets sympathy. Real pain gets ignored. Sometimes the better actor gets the help. The quieter sufferer gets nothing. That's why this matters. Because the assumption that pain is always obvious, always trustworthy, is a myth. And it's a myth that gets people hurt. There's a name for the darker version of this. Malingering, faking illness or injury for personal gain. But before you judge, understand the logic. In a world where people are ignored unless they scream, is it any wonder some learn to scream louder? And sometimes it isn't calculated. It's learned. People learn that pain is power. That showing hurt gets results. That suffering is a currency. And the better you display it, the more you're worth. So pain becomes performance. And performance becomes survival. But this doesn't just affect individuals, it shapes culture. Think about media. Viral videos of people crying, hurting, collapsing in grief. The comments flood in. I feel so bad for them. This broke me. Protect this person at all costs. We don't demand evidence. We don't check facts. We feel, and in feeling, we decide. Empathy becomes algorithmic, and truth becomes optional. So here you are, living in a world where pain is both sacred and suspicious, where feeling too much makes you a fool, and feeling too little makes you a sociopath. You can't trust others, you can't trust yourself. And in that space of doubt, manipulation thrives. Bad actors learn the cues. They know the right words, the right tremble in their voice, and they can turn your empathy into a weapon. They don't have to control you. They just have to look like they're in pain, because the brain doesn't know the difference. And if you're not careful, neither will you. You're not weak for caring, but you are vulnerable. And the people who understand that vulnerability will use it. They won't stab you. They'll cry and let you hand them the knife. And you'll do it with sympathy in your eyes. The ones you need to be most careful around might not be the ones who scream the loudest, but the ones who know exactly when to scream. And when you finally realize it, it'll already be too late. You'll have believed a lie, acted on it, maybe even hurt someone else because of it. All because you saw pain, and your brain told you it must be real. But if you think that's unsettling, wait until you realize the next part. Because to keep you standing upright, your brain lies in ways that are even stranger. It doesn't just fake feelings, it fakes physics, and you never even notice. Your body is still. The room is quiet. Nothing moves, but you feel it. A gentle sway, a subtle dip, a phantom motion that doesn't match what your eyes see. For a split second, your world tilts and your stomach lurches as if something invisible just shifted beneath your feet. No, you're not imagining it. Your brain just lied to you, because to keep you upright, stable and sane, it has to. Your brain fakes motion to keep you balanced. Let's start with a strange but simple truth. Your brain is more interested in survival than honesty and balance. Physical stability is non-negotiable. You walk, you turn, you sit up straight without thinking. But every single one of those actions depends on your brain performing a silent magic trick. You see, your brain doesn't just read sensory data, it writes it. If your eyes, ears, or body send conflicting information, your brain doesn't panic. It edits. It fabricates motion. It invents stillness. It distorts reality to preserve a fragile equilibrium. The most famous example, the vestibular system. Deep inside your inner ear are tiny canals filled with fluid. When you move, that fluid sloshes around like water in a tilted glass. Hair-like receptors detect the movement and send that data to your brain. But here's the problem. Your eyes might be saying you're still. Your muscles might say you're standing still. Yet your inner ear insists you're spinning. What does your brain do? It makes a choice. It decides which reality to believe. And then it lies to you accordingly. The lies that keep you upright. Ever sat in a parked car while the vehicle next to you started moving? Your brain sometimes tells you you're moving too, even though you're not. Why? Because the sensory contradiction is too destabilizing. So your brain picks a narrative and sells it to your consciousness, like it's the truth. This happens constantly. It's not a glitch, it's the system working perfectly. Your balance, your sense of up, down, stillness, motion isn't based on reality. It's based on consensus. A fragile, ever-changing agreement between your eyes, your ears, and your body. When they disagree, your brain fakes motion or erases it to preserve the illusion of control. Motion sickness is what happens when this lie breaks down. Your inner ear says you're moving, your eyes say you're not, and your brain can't reconcile the two. The result? Nausea, dizziness, and a desperate, primal panic. Your system revolts because it's losing the script. You don't just lose balance, you lose your sense of reality. Virtual reality and the collapse of trust. Virtual reality is where the brain's illusions become dangerous. In VR, your eyes say you're flying, falling, or spinning, but your body knows you're standing still. Your vestibular system knows you're lying, and the conflict is immediate, disorienting, sometimes violently so. People fall, they vomit, they panic, not because the headset is faulty, but because the brain can't keep up with its own deceptions. The illusion collapses, and with it, the sense of self. Because balance isn't just physical, it's psychological. It's your brain's way of telling you, you're okay, you're here, this is real. Break that signal, and everything starts to slip. The illusion of control. Here's the twist. The brain doesn't just lie about motion. It lies about agency. It convinces you that you're in control of your body when you're not. Half a second before you decide to move, your motor cortex has already made the call. Your conscious mind comes in afterward, like a PR agent writing press releases for decisions it didn't actually make. You're not steering the ship, you're just narrating the journey. The same way your brain fakes motion to protect balance, it fakes control to protect your identity. It gives you the illusion of authorship, of intention, of free will. Because without that lie, you'd collapse, not physically, psychologically. You'd be forced to admit that your choices, your actions, even your sense of self, are just stories told after the fact. Carefully edited, smoothed over, and stitched together to keep you functional. The truth is unbearable, so your brain spares you from it. Phantom limbs and manufactured reality. There's something called phantom limb syndrome. An amputee feels pain, pressure, or motion in a limb that no longer exists. Why? Because the brain isn't reading a body. It's maintaining a map. That map, the body schema, doesn't update instantly. So your brain continues to simulate motion and sensation where there is none. It fakes physical presence to avoid psychological collapse. It's the same trick over and over. Lie, edit, fabricate. Anything to maintain continuity. Anything to stop you from falling into the floor or into madness. The system doesn't prioritize truth. It prioritizes coherence. You are not perceiving reality. You are experiencing a curated hallucination built to keep you sane, and that illusion begins and ends with balance. Because once balance is gone, everything else unravels. You lose motion, then orientation, then self, and your brain will do anything to keep that from happening, even if it means lying to you every second of your life. You don't live in reality. You live in whatever version of reality your brain can get away with. And that should terrify you. Because if your brain is willing to fake motion just to keep you upright, what else is it faking? You're not just standing, you're standing on a story. And the more stable it feels, the more convincing the lie must be. You feel steady, you feel safe, you feel real. But you should know by now, feeling something doesn't make it true. You just haven't fallen yet. What happens when you stop trusting your balance? What happens when the lies feel more stable than the truth? Keep watching. You're about to find out why people think they're in control while being lied to. Imagine this. You walk into a room, flip a switch, and the light turns on. You smile. You believe you're in control. But what if I told you the light was already rigged to respond before your hand ever touched the switch? Control is one of the most powerful illusions ever created, and it's incredibly easy to fake. You think you're driving the car, but the GPS has already mapped your journey. You think you're choosing your words, but your vocabulary was shaped by ads, social scripts, and invisible algorithms long before you spoke. You think you're free because you're allowed to choose, but only from a menu that someone else wrote. Let's talk about the experiment that shattered this illusion. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet hooked subjects up to a machine and asked them to press a button whenever they felt the urge. He measured the brain activity that preceded each action, and what he found was disturbing. The brain had already begun preparing to press the button before the subject consciously decided to act. The decision wasn't made by you, it was made by your brain silently milliseconds before you were even aware. In other words, your conscious choice was just an afterthought. But it gets worse, because even when you are aware, you're often being lied to, and you're helping. The Milgram experiment is famous for its shocking conclusion. Ordinary people will administer potentially fatal electric shocks to strangers if told to do so by an authority figure. But it wasn't just obedience that made the results terrifying, it was the rationalizations. These subjects didn't just follow orders, they convinced themselves they were doing the right thing. They reinterpreted pain as progress, cruelty as necessity. They lied to themselves because it was easier than accepting they weren't in control. And here's the haunting part. You do it too. You believe in the news article because it confirms your bias. You trust the app because it feels personalized. You accept the terms and conditions without reading them because you think you have no choice. But every time you surrender attention without scrutiny, every time you scroll mindlessly or click agree, you're not making a decision. You're reinforcing a lie. The lie that you're the one in control. This illusion is maintained not through force, but through design. Look at how ads are personalized to your tastes. How recommendations feed you content you didn't even know you wanted. You think the system is adapting to you. In reality, you're adapting to it. You're becoming the person it wants you to be. Behavioral scientists call it choice architecture, shaping decisions by controlling the context in which they're made. Supermarkets put candy at eye level for children. Apps reward you with likes, badges, streaks. You're nudged, guided, steered, not commanded, but controlled. It feels voluntary. That's what makes it so effective. Now, ask yourself, when was the last time you made a choice without invisible influence? A choice not guided by convenience, not shaped by habit, not pushed by fear of missing out. It's not that you're incapable of free will, it's that you're surrounded by systems engineered to suppress it, quietly, subtly, beautifully. We build our sense of self around the idea that we are rational, autonomous, in control. But our brains are riddled with biases: confirmation bias, anchoring bias, authority bias, all of which make us easy targets for manipulation. And here's the twist that seals the trap. You're not just the victim of these lies, you become their agent. Once you've internalized the illusion of control, you teach it to others. You shame the person who questions authority. You mock the one who thinks differently. You defend the system, because to question it would mean admitting that you're not steering the ship, after all. People don't need to be brainwashed to comply. They just need to feel comfortable and convinced that their compliance is freedom. That's the paradox. You feel free because you don't feel the chains. You trust your choices because they feel like yours. But you're only allowed to choose from a curated list, only allowed to speak within an acceptable range, only allowed to feel what keeps the system stable. And as long as you believe you're the one choosing, you will never look up to see who's actually pulling the strings. The truth? You are being lied to every day, and you're helping spread the lie, not out of malice, but because it's safer to believe you're in control than to face the dizzying uncertainty that maybe, just maybe, you're not. And if you want to break free, the first step isn't rebellion. It's recognition. The recognition that your sense of control has been designed, rehearsed, and sold back to you with a smile. You didn't choose this script, you're just reciting it well, and until you know that, until you feel it, you're not in control, you're just a well-behaved actor in someone else's play. But once you realize that, the illusion starts to crack. What happens next is entirely up to you, or at least that's what you'll want to believe. You think that was uncomfortable? Good, because what you're about to learn next might break your brain before it even knows what it's seeing. Don't blink. You don't see the image first, you feel it. Before your eyes even finish registering what's in front of you, your body has already responded. Muscles tighten, pupils dilate, breath shortens, all in fractions of a second, too fast for conscious thought, too fast even for awareness. It's as if your body knows something before you do. Because it does. This isn't speculation. It's been measured, documented, repeated in labs across the world. Researchers flash emotionally charged images, violent scenes, erotic content, threatening faces for mere milliseconds. Too fast for the conscious mind to perceive. And yet, the body reacts. Skin conductance rises. The heart rate shifts. The amygdala, the brain's threat detector, lights up like a flare. But how is that possible? How can you react to something you didn't even consciously see? Your perception, it turns out, isn't a passive camera taking snapshots of the world. It's a prediction machine, and your nervous system is wired not for accuracy, but for survival. If it had to wait for your conscious mind to catch up, it would already be too late. So it skips the line. It cheats. Your body makes the call before you're even aware there was a question. It assesses danger, registers attraction, decides friend or foe, all before your mind finishes its first sentence. Consciousness trails behind like a delayed commentary track, narrating decisions you never really made. This is where the illusion begins, because you think you're the one in control, that you are the driver. But really, you're more like the commentator, the press secretary, explaining, rationalizing, justifying choices made in secret, behind closed doors, without your input. You don't decide how you feel about something. You discover it, and then pretend it was your idea all along. This is why optical illusions work. Why jump scares make you flinch, even when you're expecting them. Why racist or sexist biases can persist in people who consciously believe in equality. Because your conscious beliefs are the paint. The unconscious responses are the canvas underneath. And sometimes they bleed through. But this goes even deeper. Consider blind sight, a phenomenon where people who are clinically blind can still react to visual stimuli. They can't consciously see. They can guess the direction of a moving object, identify emotions on unseen faces, even navigate rooms. The eyes send information, but the conscious mind receives none of it. It's like their brain sees without them. That's not a glitch, that's a glimpse. A glimpse into how much of you is actually invisible to you. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. By the time you see something, your body has already decided what it means. It's already decided whether to fear it, trust it, desire it, or hate it. You are the last to know. This has terrifying implications. Imagine watching the news, scrolling through social media, walking down a street, and realizing that your emotional reactions are being shaped before you're even aware of them. You're not choosing how to feel. You're being primed, nudged, influenced. Your nervous system is quietly sculpting your worldview without consulting you first. You might pride yourself on being rational, Logical, conscious, but logic is slow. Emotion is fast. And in that speed is power. That's why political propaganda uses faces, symbols, and colors designed to evoke fear or pride. That's why advertising leans heavily on imagery, not arguments, because the image hits first. It enters through the back door of your mind, bypassing skepticism, bypassing reason. By the time you start thinking, the damage is already done. So what does that mean? It means that if you want to understand your own mind, truly understand it, you have to stop trusting your gut. At least, not blindly. You have to get curious about your reflexes, your instant reactions, your unchosen feelings. Because those aren't you, they're the echo of systems older than thought. Systems designed for a world that no longer exists. And if you don't question them, you're not living your life. You're just reacting to it. Automatically, unconsciously, like a puppet with a delayed awareness of the strings. You don't see images first. You react to them, you feel them, you absorb their weight before you even know they're there. Your eyes may be open, but your mind is always one step behind. And the most dangerous part, it feels normal. That's how the illusion survives. You believe you saw it, but really, it saw you first. You're not imagining that shift in your stomach. You're not misreading the tension in the room. You're just late to your own reaction. And once you realize that, everything you see, everything you think you've chosen, suddenly becomes a little less certain. Now the question isn't just, what am I seeing? It's, what saw me first? You won't like the answer, but you won't be able to look away either. Not anymore, because now you know what your body knew all along, and you'll never see the same way again. You thought the image started with your eyes, but it started with your fear. There's a way to rewrite what your memory believes, and it only takes one word, one carefully chosen seed, planted in your mind, and everything that came before it starts to shift. Stay with me. You need to see how easy it is to doubt your own past. Have you ever been tricked by your own memory? Not a major thing, just a tiny detail, the color of a car, the number of people in a room, a single word someone said. You'd swear you remember it exactly. But what if I told you that memory, your most trusted sense of truth, can be flipped with just one word? That's not metaphor. That's science. It started with a simple experiment. Researchers showed participants a video of a car crash. Then they asked everyone the same question. With one subtle twist, one group was asked how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other. The other group heard, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? The first group remembered shattered glass, high speed, violence. The second group, a fender bender, no glass, lower speeds, same video, same event. One word changed, and yet it rewrote the past. This is the misinformation effect. When post-event information, especially language, alters how we remember, not how we interpret, how we remember. Our minds aren't cameras, they're editors, constantly rewriting, smoothing, reshaping memory, like wet clay based on the latest suggestion. Think about that for a second. What you think you remember might not be what happened. It might be a version carefully sculpted by the way someone asked a question, made a comment, or told a story. Memory isn't a vault, it's a garden, and suggestion is the weather. And you're not the gardener. You're just standing there as storms pass through. The implications are chilling. Eyewitness testimony, long seen as gold in courtrooms, is shockingly unreliable. Not because people lie, but because their memories have been politely edited. A leading question, a loaded word, a phrase framed just right. It's all it takes. Now imagine this power in the hands of those with intent. Media headlines don't just report, they frame protester versus rioters, recession versus market correction. Every label alters your memory of what you saw, even if you watched it with your own eyes. Political debates don't fight facts. They fight frames. Whoever controls the language controls the past. This isn't just psychology, it's control. Your memory is supposed to ground you. It's your sense of continuity, your thread through time. If that can be pulled, warped, or replaced, what are you left with? A sense of truth that isn't truly yours. And here's the real twist. You'll never know it happened. That's the final cruelty. You don't remember your memory being changed. You just remember differently. And because it feels real, it feels true. That's how powerful suggestion is. Let's go deeper. Even the tone of a question changes memory. Ask someone, "Did you see the man with the scar?" And they'll remember a scar, even if there wasn't one. Ask, "Did you see a man?" And the scar disappears from memory. The language guides not just what you remember, but what you imagine remembering. And once imagined, it merges with memory. That's how false memories are born. Not through lies, but through language. Think of your childhood. Are your most vivid memories real? Or are they reconstructions? Fragments built from family stories, old photos, and phrases you've heard repeated. Memory is not a replay button. It's a reconstruction. Every recall is a renovation. Now let's talk about how this isn't just manipulation, it's vulnerability. This flaw in memory isn't a bug, it's a feature. The brain evolved not to preserve perfect records, but to adapt, survive, and prioritize social cohesion over factual accuracy. It matters more to remember events in a way that supports group harmony, emotional stability, or belief systems than to preserve photographic truth. You lie to yourself about your memories all the time without knowing, to protect your ego, to maintain your identity, to justify your actions. The right word at the right moment can make that lie permanent. And the worst part, you'd pass a lie detector test about it. Because to you, it's no longer a lie, it's what happened. You can't trust your memory, not fully, not blindly. And once you know that, it's hard to ever feel certain again. Because every memory you hold might already be rewritten, especially the ones you're most sure of. You're not just vulnerable to lies from others, you're vulnerable to lies you believe are truth. You're vulnerable to suggestion. And now you must wonder how many of your most precious memories, your truths, are just stories someone else accidentally rewrote. How many times has one word turned your past into fiction? And how would you ever know? Because certainty is not a sign of accuracy. It's just a feeling, and feelings lie. You remember what you were made to remember. You believe what you were prepared to believe. And the scariest part, you don't just remember wrong. You remember wrong confidently. You remember wrong forever. You don't need a brainwash machine. You just need a word. And suddenly, you're not the person you thought you were. You're a version. You're an edit. You're a draft someone else helped write, even if they only changed a single word. And even if they didn't mean to. Stay with that thought, because the next thing you feel might not even be yours. You can't stop now. The next piece might just explain the discomfort gnawing at the edges of your mind. Imagine you're lying in a hospital bed. A needle slides into your skin. The doctor says, "This will hurt," and it does. But you knew it would. You accepted it. You believe it's for your own good. And strangely, that belief, the idea that the pain is justified, makes it bearable. Now imagine the same needle, same pain, but this time no warning, no explanation, just pain. Sudden, sharp, unjustified. Now it's unbearable. Now it feels like punishment, like betrayal. This is the disturbing truth. Pain hurts less when we think it's fair. This isn't just philosophy, it's been tested. In one study, participants were subjected to mild electric shocks. When they were told the shocks served a purpose, when they believed they were part of a valuable experiment, they rated the pain as significantly less intense. But when the shocks felt random, meaningless, or punitive, the same pain became intolerable. Why? Because the human brain doesn't just process pain physically, it processes pain morally. When pain feels deserved, the mind integrates it, accepts it. But when pain feels unfair, it rebels. It amplifies the suffering. Think about how this plays out in everyday life. Imagine working out at the gym. You strain, you sweat, you ache, but you embrace it because the pain promises progress. Now imagine lifting boxes in a warehouse for a boss who underpays and disrespects you. The physical toll might be the same, but the emotional weight entirely different. We don't just suffer, we suffer in context. The military understands this. Soldiers are trained to associate pain with honor, with purpose. Suffering becomes a badge, a ritual, and because it feels earned, it transforms. What would break an untrained civilian becomes endurable, even meaningful, under the right belief system. This applies to relationships too. If someone you love hurts you, but you think it's for your growth, or theirs, or some deeper cause, you rationalize it. They didn't mean to. They're going through something. The pain becomes part of a narrative. And if that narrative makes sense to you, you stay, you endure. Because it's not the pain alone that breaks us. It's the betrayal. When pain feels unjustified, it shatters trust. It isolates. It turns the world hostile. A child punished without understanding why learns not discipline, but fear. A patient undergoing surgery without consent experiences not healing, but trauma. It's not the pain that scars, it's the meaning we assign to it. This is how systems manipulate you. Corporations exploit this mechanism by branding your suffering as sacrifice. You're building your future. Low wages, you're paying your dues. You're told the grind is noble, that pain equals progress. And as long as you believe it's fair, you won't revolt. You'll endure, even when it's exploitation. Religious institutions have used this for centuries. Suffering brings you closer to God. This life is a test. If your pain has meaning, you're less likely to reject the system that causes it. Instead of resisting, you internalize it. You submit, because it's easier to endure pain than to admit it's meaningless. It's easier to believe you deserved it. Now, here's where it gets darker. Once you've been trained to link pain with fairness, you start seeking it. You see pain as redemption, a way to cleanse guilt. You convince yourself the suffering is proof of moral strength, that you're earning something. But what if you're not? What if you're just trapped? What if you're just finding comfort in discomfort? Because the alternative, realizing you were hurt for no reason, is too unbearable to face. This is the paradox. Pain becomes tolerable when we believe it serves justice. But that belief can be manipulated. And when it is, you stop fighting back. You stop asking whether the pain is necessary. You stop wondering if the system itself is broken, because the pain feels earned. And as long as it feels earned, you stay quiet. But the truth is, fairness is often an illusion, a mask, a justification we cling to because it's less terrifying than the chaos of senseless suffering. And so we endure, and endure, and endure. Not because the pain is less, but because we've been convinced it's what we deserve. You're not weak for hurting, but you must ask yourself, have you mistaken punishment for purpose? Because the moment you stop believing the pain is fair, That's when the real pain begins. And yet, once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. You start noticing every rule you follow, every burden you carry, and you start asking, what if it never mattered? What if the reason you've been suffering isn't justice, but obedience? What if the rules were never meant for you? You're not ready to stop now. Something's unraveling, and you need to know how deep it goes. Imagine a child in a lab coat, small hands carefully stacking blocks in a very specific pattern. The rule is simple: red block on top, green block on the bottom. No explanation, no goal. Just follow the rule, and they do, over and over. You ask why, and they say, because that's how it's supposed to be. That's the haunting part, not the obedience, the certainty. This is the heart of a study that shook developmental psychology. Children, as young as 4, were told to perform tasks with arbitrary instructions. And even when those instructions made the task harder, slower, or senseless, they followed them religiously, repeatedly, even when no one was watching. Why? Because rules, to a child, feel like truth, not suggestion, not possibility. Truth. This isn't about intelligence. These were capable kids, fully able to identify when a rule was pointless. But they obeyed anyway, because the rule had become part of the reality. The world was red on top, green on bottom. To violate it felt wrong. Even imaginary infractions made some kids visibly uncomfortable. And here's the deeper terror: this doesn't stop in childhood. As adults, we become slightly more selective, but the reflex is still there. That's just how it's done, because I was told to. Because that's the rule. Corporate policies, traffic laws, social etiquette. We follow rituals that serve no clear function, and many that actively hurt us. But disobedience feels dirty, like cheating on something sacred. What's being shaped in those early years is more than behavior. It's ontology. A child who follows rules that don't make sense isn't just being obedient, they're learning to conflate authority with reality. If a trusted adult says it, it becomes the structure of the world. The habit persists. Trust the system, even when it doesn't make sense. This explains a lot more than you'd expect. Even notice how people will defend systems that fail them. How they'll scream at cashiers for enforcing pointless policies, but still follow those policies to the letter when roles are reversed. We inherit pointless rules and then become their enforcers. Not because we believe in them, but because the alternative feels chaotic, unsafe, wrong. It's not just conformity, it's a deep psychological need for order. And nothing creates a sense of order like a rule, even a bad one. Consider the Milgram experiment. Adults willingly administered what they believed were dangerous electric shocks just because an authority figure told them to. They were distressed, even horrified, but they obeyed. The rule had been established. Follow the instructor. The internal discomfort didn't override the learned script. And this isn't a malfunction, it's a feature. Society runs on this programming. Every stable culture reinforces rule following in children. Why? Because a population that instinctively obeys, even in the face of absurdity, is easy to manage, predictable, safe. But that safety has a cost. Blind rule following creates blind spots. We follow paths that make no sense, defend traditions that hurt people, enforce hierarchies that no longer serve any purpose, because the rule says so, because we've confused structure with morality, and that confusion is dangerous, not just philosophically, practically. It's why people freeze in emergencies, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. It's why bureaucracies grind forward, unyielding, even in the face of obvious harm. It's why people will report their neighbors for breaking meaningless rules while ignoring real suffering right next door. The rule becomes the moral axis, not the outcome, not the context, just the rule. Now imagine a different child in the same experiment. They pause, they question. Why does it have to be red on top? Their voice is uncertain, hesitant, but something inside resists the arbitrary. That moment of resistance, that's not disobedience. It's the birth of autonomy. And yet, that child is often corrected, nudged, shamed. Just follow the instructions. They learn quickly that questions are friction. That resistance disrupts harmony. That obedience is rewarded and deviation is punished, not always overtly, but socially, with a glance, a sigh, a removal of praise. So we suppress the question. We learn to override our instincts. And by adulthood, the red block always goes on top. Unless something breaks the spell. Unless the rules fail us hard enough, repeatedly enough, that we start to look closer. Or unless we choose discomfort over convenience, curiosity over conformity, freedom over approval. Because the truth is, pointless rules only exist because people keep following them. And once you realize that, you start to see the world differently. You stop asking, what am I allowed to do? And start asking, what's actually true? You stop living by scripts and start writing your own. But that first question, that first refusal, it always starts in a whisper, a pause, a moment of doubt in a room full of certainty. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. You've been taught to search for meaning in order. But what if meaning lives in chaos instead? What if the patterns you think you see are just noise dressed in disguise? Imagine you're staring at a static screen, black and white snow, flickering, buzzing. It's nothing, just noise. But then your brain kicks in. You start to see something, a face, a shape, a symbol. You blink, it's gone. Did you imagine it? Or did something real flicker through? Your mind is built to detect patterns, even where none exist. It's a survival instinct, an ancient software running in the background, faces in the dark, voices in the wind, a sense of being watched. Sometimes those instincts saved lives, but now they trick you, constantly. And the scariest part, you almost never notice. This isn't a glitch, it's how your brain works. Your mind is a meaning machine. It sees signals in the noise, messages in randomness, order in chaos. You walk into a casino and watch a roulette wheel land red 5 times in a row. You know rationally that each spin is independent, but your gut tells you black is due. That's the gambler's fallacy. And it's not just dumb luck, it's deep psychology. Now imagine a slot machine. Flashing lights, jangling sounds, a near win that makes your heart race. 2 cherries and a lemon. So close, but not quite. That near miss isn't random. It's designed, engineered, to trigger your pattern-hungry brain. To keep you hooked, because a pattern, even a false one, feels like progress. You feel like you're getting closer. You're not, but your brain believes it. Even randomness has rhythm, if you stare long enough. Coincidences, serendipity, synchronicity, none of them are supernatural, but they feel like they are. A friend you were just thinking about suddenly texts you. A song that perfectly matches your mood starts playing. Your brain lights up. It says, "This means something." It doesn't. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that it feels like it does. Now take this deeper. Look at conspiracy theories. They're not just stories, they're pattern addiction. Connecting dots where there are none. Linking events with invisible threads. Every coincidence becomes a clue. Every gap in knowledge becomes proof of a cover-up. The more chaotic the world feels, the more we crave hidden order. Because chaos is terrifying. Pattern, even false pattern, is comfort. This is why people see faces on Mars, images of saints in toast, meaning in meaningless statistics. It's why lottery players pick birthdays and sports fans have lucky socks. It's not about logic, it's about control. If the world is random, then we are powerless. But if there's a pattern, even an illusion, we feel safer, smarter, in control. But here's the paradox: that very instinct can make you blind. Look at stock traders chasing trends that don't exist. Look at people stuck in toxic relationships because they believe there's a deeper pattern or reason it keeps happening. Look at how we read personality into algorithms, assign intention to accidents, or believe fate is guiding us. We can't tell the difference between chaos and design, and that makes us vulnerable. Even science isn't immune. Researchers look at a data set and find statistical noise, but if they squint, tweak, manipulate, a pattern appears. P-hacking, data dredging. Suddenly, there's a discovery. Headlines are made, funding secured. But it's a ghost, a phantom, a trick of the numbers. The line between discovery and delusion, it's thinner than we like to admit, because our brains don't want truth. They want coherence, and randomness offers none. So we invent it, project it, carve pattern into the void. And once we see it, we can't unsee it. That's called pattern lock. We bend the world to fit the pattern we believe is real, even when it's killing us. And here's the final twist. Sometimes randomness itself is the pattern. In quantum physics, particles behave probabilistically. In evolution, mutations are random, but selection gives them shape. The universe itself might be a product of fluctuations in a random field. Chaos, not order, may be the foundation of everything. And yet, we still search for meaning, because we're human, because we must. So ask yourself, what patterns have you invented just to feel less afraid? What ghosts have you believed in, because the silence was too loud? What lies have you mistaken for logic, because the truth felt too random? If you can't tell the difference between chaos and design, what else can't you see? You don't need to reject every pattern, but you do need to question the ones that comfort you the most. Because comfort doesn't mean clarity, and meaning doesn't always mean truth. Sometimes it just means you're still trying to make sense of a world that was never built to make sense in the first place. You just didn't notice, because the pattern was too perfect, and the silence too convincing. You think that was unsettling. Wait until you realize your mind doesn't just see pain, it feels it, even when it's not your own. You've probably felt it before, watching someone else stub their toe or wince in agony and feeling a twinge in your own body, a reflex, a shadow of their pain in your own nerves. But this isn't just empathy. It's not kindness. It's something more primal, more involuntary. Your brain can't tell the difference. Mirror neurons are the hidden culprits. Tiny, silent mimics scattered across your brain that don't just observe, but simulate. When you see someone in pain, your brain doesn't just understand it, it rehearses it. It echoes the agony, as if prepping you for the same fate. It's not just sympathy, it's rehearsal. When a friend gets hurt, you flinch. When a character in a film is tortured, your heart rate spikes, your palms sweat. And when someone screams in pain, your brain lights up in all the same places as if you were screaming yourself. This is your biology's version of empathy, a built-in simulation engine. But it comes at a cost. Imagine walking through a hospital, seeing suffering everywhere. Your mirror neurons absorb every grimace, every tremor, every moan. One patient's anguish becomes a dozen phantom injuries you carry without realizing. You're a sponge, an unwilling vessel for second-hand pain. And it doesn't stop with strangers. Parents feel the tears of their children as if their own bodies were breaking. Lovers sense the emotional agony of one another like open wounds. The pain isn't just seen, it's shared, embodied. But here's the twist. The closer you feel to someone, the stronger the mirror effect becomes. Your brain doesn't react to everyone equally. It filters pain through familiarity, through identity. A loved one's suffering burns hotter than a stranger's. A person who looks like you, sounds like you, thinks like you, they hit closer. Literally, because your mirror neurons aren't just tools for empathy. They're tribal weapons. They're selective, partial, biased. Which means this simulation of pain, this neural echo, isn't universal, it's political. It's filtered by race, class, kinship, and culture. A person across the world suffering might barely register. But someone like you, someone in your circle, that hits like a gut punch. Your brain cares more, you feel more. And that means the pain of others isn't equal in your mind. Now think about what that means. Injustice feels distant when it doesn't look like you. Foreign suffering becomes data, statistics, something to sympathize with but not feel. Because your neurons won't simulate what your brain doesn't deem familiar. That's how apathy is born. Not from cruelty, but from neurological bias. The same system that lets you feel another's agony also blinds you to suffering that doesn't feel personal. It's why we mourn celebrity deaths while ignoring refugee camps. It's why a single viral video can cause global outrage while entire genocides unfold in silence. Because your mirror neurons don't respond to logic, they respond to faces. Familiarity, emotional relevance. And that's dangerous. Because if you only feel the pain of those who resemble you, if your empathy has borders, if your nervous system draws lines around who counts, then your morality becomes territorial, your compassion becomes selective, and your humanity becomes fragmented. This built-in mimicry, once an evolutionary survival tool, now shapes the contours of your conscience. It makes you vulnerable to manipulation. Propaganda doesn't just tell you who the enemy is, it shows you their face. And once that face becomes unfamiliar, your mirror neurons shut off. You no longer feel their pain, you feel justified. Empathy dies when the simulation engine powers down, and so the ability to feel someone else's pain becomes the battleground for politics, media, identity. A war not fought with bullets, but with attention. And simulation decides who we suffer for. So here's the question. If your brain automatically simulates some pain and not others, are you really in control of your morality? Or are you just following a script your neurons wrote for you? One that mirrors, filters, and edits who counts as human enough to hurt for. And if you can't feel everyone's pain equally, can you ever act justly? Or are you forever trapped in a feedback loop of selective suffering? What we do with other people's pain, how we absorb it, respond to it, or silence it, might be the truest test of who we are. And the cruel irony. The more you allow yourself to feel it, the more it hurts. But maybe that's the price of being human. Pain shared is pain multiplied. But it's also pain understood. And without understanding, all that's left is distance. And distance is what makes cruelty possible. You felt their pain because you were supposed to. But what happens when you can't feel it anymore? Stay right here, because what you're about to discover will make you question how much of your reality is built on emotion you never chose. You're in a crowded room. Someone across from you is smiling, laughing, maybe even crying, but something's missing. You can see their face, their mouth moving, their eyes blinking, but it's all wrong. It feels off, like watching a puppet made of skin. You can't place why, but the emotion, the essence is gone. This isn't just a hunch, it's how your brain works, or rather, how it fails to work when emotion is stripped away. There's a rare condition called affective prosopagnosia. It's not that these people can't see faces, they can perfectly. They can describe every feature. But when it comes to recognizing those faces as familiar, as human, their brains fail. Why? Because the emotional tag, the invisible signature that tells you this person matters, is missing. Without emotion, a face is just geometry. Eyes are circles, noses are triangles, nothing more. Now here's where it gets disturbing. This isn't limited to people with brain damage. It happens to you every day. Every time you scroll past someone suffering. Every time you hear a statistic but not a story. When emotion isn't attached, your brain files the face as unimportant, just another blur in the background. Because the truth is, you don't recognize people, not really. You feel them. Think about someone you love. Picture their face. What comes first? Is it their eye color? The exact curve of their jawline? Of course not. What you feel is their presence. The warmth in their eyes, the way their smile settles your nerves, the emotion their face brings to life in you. That's not perception, that's connection. That's what your brain needs to know, a person is real. But here's the twist. Your brain can fake it. It can assign emotion where there is none. You've felt it watching a movie, haven't you? A character cries and suddenly you're overwhelmed. But that's not a real person. It's pixels, it's light on a screen. And yet you feel it, because your brain wants to feel it. Now flip it. You see a refugee on the news, or a homeless man on the street, and your brain, for reasons you don't control, doesn't assign the same emotional weight. You see the face, but you don't recognize it. Not really, because that recognition requires emotional relevance, and without it, that person becomes invisible. This isn't your fault. It's how the human mind filters a world too full of faces to handle. But it has terrifying consequences, because once a face becomes emotionally invisible, anything can happen to it. Governments can bomb it. Companies can exploit it. You can walk right past it, without a flicker of guilt. And the scariest part, you'll never even notice. The Nazis didn't just murder millions, they dehumanized them first. Stripped the faces of Jews, Roma, and countless others of emotional relevance. Turned them into statistics. Data, faces without meaning. Once that switch flips, empathy vanishes. Conscience shuts down. And this isn't history, it's happening now, on social media, in politics. Every time we sort people into us and them, we see the face, but if we don't feel the face, we don't recognize it. And when we stop recognizing people, we start forgetting they're people at all. This is how atrocities begin, not with hate, but with indifference. So ask yourself, who don't you recognize? Not because you've never seen them, but because you've never felt them. Which faces have become so common, they've turned invisible. You think you're a rational creature, that you make decisions based on logic. But every recognition, every reaction, every moral impulse you have is filtered through emotion first. You can't escape it. You never could. Emotion isn't a weakness of the mind. It's the operating system. Strip it away, and nothing works. And that's why the scariest part of all isn't that you can't recognize a face without emotion. It's that someone else can control which faces you feel. They can choose which stories to tell, which faces get airtime, which victims receive your tears, and which ones vanish before you even notice. Your empathy is programmable. That's the horrifying truth. Because if your ability to see others as human depends on emotion, and your emotion can be manipulated, what part of your morality is truly your own? If you think that's unsettling, just wait until you realize the story you're living. might not be one you actually chose. Keep watching. The truth isn't done with you yet. Have you ever watched your hand reach for something before you even decide to move? Felt your mouth form a reply before you fully understood the question? It feels like you're in control, but you're not. At least, not in the way you think, because your brain doesn't just perceive the world, it narrates it. And sometimes it writes the story after the events unfold. It's unsettling, but true. What you think of as your conscious experience, your awareness, your decisions, your reality, is often a reconstruction. A backfilled narrative created milliseconds, even seconds after the fact. There's a name for this post-dictive illusion, and it's not a glitch, it's how your brain survives. Start with something simple. Vision. You assume you see the world in real time. But studies show there's a lag. When you look at a moving object, your brain waits ever so briefly before deciding what it saw and when. It delays its verdict just long enough to gather more information, then plays the moment back as if it happened instantly. This isn't a minor trick, it's a fundamental lie, a silent, seamless deception. Your brain performs thousands of times a day, and you never notice it. Because you're not supposed to. Consider the famous flash lag effect. A light flashes on a moving object, and people consistently see the flash behind where the object actually is. It's not that their eyes are slow, it's that their brain is late and compensates by guessing what must have happened, not what did happen, what probably happened. Now think about how you make decisions. You believe you choose to act, then your body responds. But research says otherwise. In one experiment, participants were asked to press a button whenever they felt like it, and to report the exact moment they decided to press it. Brain scans showed the neural preparation to move occurred up to 7 seconds before they consciously made the decision. 7 seconds. That means your brain made the choice, and only afterward did your mind catch up, creating the illusion that you made the decision. Free will, then, becomes a kind of theater, a story your mind tells itself to maintain the illusion of control, and the script is always written in past tense. Even your memories aren't safe. They're not records, they're reconstructions, rewritten every time you recall them. Your brain updates, edits, and sometimes fabricates details to make the memory more coherent, more convenient, or more flattering. You don't remember what happened. You remember the last story you told yourself about what happened. This is why two people can experience the same event and recall it completely differently. It's not just perspective, it's fabrication. Each brain creates a narrative that feels consistent with its own internal logic, biases, and expectations. And once that narrative sets in, it becomes nearly impossible to dislodge. Now imagine the implications. If your brain fabricates vision, sensation, memory, and choice, what exactly is real? Is your personality just the sum of these stories? Are your beliefs, your values, your identity, just post hoc rationalizations of impulses and actions that occurred without your conscious input? Here's the truly disturbing part. The illusion isn't a flaw, it's adaptive. Because if you had to consciously process every sensation, decision, and action in real time, you'd freeze. You'd drown in data. The narrative your brain constructs gives you continuity, stability, sanity. But at what cost? You trust your mind. You think you know why you do things. You believe in your morals, your memories, your choices. And yet, all of it might be a carefully curated lie, spun by a brain whose primary goal isn't truth, but survival. And if that's the case, how much of your life is truly yours? You feel autonomous, but you're largely automated. You feel honest, but your memories are fiction. You feel free, but your choices are made before you're even aware. So the next time you tell yourself why you did something, why you snapped, why you forgave, why you stayed or left or lied, ask yourself, is this the truth? Or just the story your brain invented to make sense of something it never really understood? Because the real horror isn't that your brain makes up the story after it happens. It's that you never even notice, and you never stop believing it. You still think you're the author, but you're just the narrator, reading aloud a script you never wrote. You want to believe you're in charge, but part of you already knows the decision was made before you even knew there was a choice. And that's why the story always sounds so convincing. Because by the time you hear it, it's already over. You're just catching up. Sometimes too late. You ever wonder if you're even real? Stay with that thought, because what's coming next might touch something that isn't even there. Imagine feeling something brush against your skin, a light touch, a soft caress. You flinch, you look, but there's nothing there. No hand, no object, no contact. And yet, the sensation is unmistakably real. This isn't science fiction. It's your nervous system. Your body doesn't need to be touched. To feel touched, that's the eerie truth. The brain is more concerned with the expectation of sensation than the actual stimulus. In fact, it can fabricate the sensation entirely on its own. Phantom limb syndrome is the most well-known example. Amputees often report feeling pain or tingling in a limb that's no longer there. To their brain, that arm, that leg, it still exists. It still itches. It still hurts. The nerves may be gone, but the map of the body in the brain, the somatosensory cortex, remains intact. It fills in the blanks. But this ghost sensation isn't limited to those who've lost a limb. Think about VR. Virtual reality systems can convince your brain that you're walking, falling, or being touched, even when you're just standing still in your living room. In some experiments, people have recoiled as if poked or prodded by nothing more than pixels and sound waves. The brain accepts the illusion. It reacts as if it were real. Then there's the rubber hand illusion. A psychologist places a fake hand in front of you, hides your real hand, and then strokes both in sync. Within minutes, your brain begins to accept the rubber hand as your own. When the fake hand is struck or threatened, you flinch, scream, even feel pain. Your brain has rewired itself to adopt a foreign object into its body map, all because of coordinated stimulation. What's terrifying is how easily this happens. Touch is one of the most primal senses we have. It's tied to survival, bonding, danger, and comfort. And because it's so deeply rooted, it's also incredibly vulnerable to manipulation. You don't need to be touched to feel safe, or threatened, or violated. The idea of touch is enough. And sometimes the body can betray itself entirely. In certain psychiatric conditions, people feel as though they're being touched when they're completely alone. The sensation is vivid. It can even escalate into pain or pressure. There's no external cause, only the mind turning against itself. This isn't imagination. These aren't hallucinations in the traditional sense. They are misfires in a system designed for survival. A system that prioritizes reaction over reality. That's what makes this so unsettling. Your brain doesn't care about what's actually happening. It cares about what it thinks is happening. It's the same system that lets you jump when you feel a spider on your skin, only to discover it was just a loose thread. Or the feeling that someone's standing behind you, watching, breathing. Even when you're alone, we've always believed that touch is the most trustworthy of the senses. You can close your eyes, you can block your ears, but touch, that's immediate. physical, tangible. Or so we thought. What we now know is this. You can be touched by memories, by fear, by suggestion. You can feel things that never happened. The sensation is real. The source is imaginary. And that's enough. So what does that mean for your sense of self? If your body can lie to you so convincingly, how can you trust anything it feels? When the mere suggestion of touch can trigger real sensation, then reality itself becomes negotiable, subjective, fragile. It means you're never truly sure if what you're feeling is happening to you or just happening inside you. And once that uncertainty creeps in, once you realize that your own skin can deceive you, the boundary between mind and body begins to dissolve. You start to wonder if you can be touched by nothing. How many of your other senses are just as vulnerable? What else have you felt that was never there? You've been taught to trust your body. But what if your body is the illusion? You're not done feeling it yet. In fact, what comes next might just pull you even deeper into this strange truth, because it's not just about touch, it's about movement, and how your brain can fool you into thinking you're moving when you haven't taken a single step. You're standing on a treadmill. It's not moving, but you feel like you are. Your legs twitch, your balance shifts, and your brain insists there's momentum. You're sweating, breathing faster, muscles tense. But look down, your feet haven't gone anywhere. This isn't a metaphor yet. It's a real phenomenon, and it starts with your brain lying to you. It's called vection, the illusion of self-motion when you're perfectly still. Ever sat in a parked car and the one next to you starts moving? Your stomach drops, your body panics because your brain can't tell if it's them or you. For a moment you're moving, until you're not. Vection reveals something deeply unsettling. Your sense of motion isn't real, it's constructed, simulated. Your body relies on a fragile alliance between vision, touch, and balance to orient itself. Disrupt that alliance, and you'll believe anything. You'll think you're falling while lying in bed. You'll think you're turning when you're still. You'll think you're progressing, when in reality you're stuck. And it's not just physical motion. This illusion bleeds into your life. Think about your goals. You wake up early. You check off tasks. You feel busy, productive. But are you moving forward or just moving in place? The sensation of progress doesn't mean real progress. Activity can be mistaken for advancement. Distraction can be mistaken for development. It's the treadmill again. Your brain says, we're moving. Reality says, no, you're not. This is why you can spend years in a job, in a relationship, in a routine, convinced things are evolving, convinced you're growing. Then one day you pause and realize you're in the same place you were a decade ago. You've changed scenery, not direction. You've spun in place, chasing the illusion of momentum. That's the deeper horror. Vection is psychological too. And it's not a glitch, it's a design feature. Your brain wants the comfort of movement, not the pain of reality. Because real progress is uncertain. It's messy. Sometimes it goes backward before it goes forward. Illusions feel safer, easier, controlled. And the world knows this. Marketing, politics, entertainment, they all exploit your craving for movement. Every app, every screen, every scroll feeds you novelty. Dopamine loops masquerading as forward motion. But nothing's really changed. You're still staring into the same lightbox, hour after hour, thinking you're going somewhere. Even therapy, self-help, transformation industries sell you vection. A rebrand, a new mantra, a burst of inspiration. You feel the change. You feel it in your bones. But unless something tangible shifts, unless you disrupt the treadmill, you're still in place. just slightly more enlightened while standing still. And this is why vection is so dangerous. It doesn't just fool your senses, it fools your identity. You begin to believe you're someone you're not. A person who grows, a person who evolves, when really you've just become better at simulating motion, smarter at spinning. But what if you stopped? What if you turned everything off? What if you sat completely still, both physically and mentally, and asked, where am I actually going? That moment would terrify you, because you'd feel the absence of motion for the first time, the silence, the stillness, the truth. And maybe then, for the first time, you'd understand that moving isn't the same as progressing, that the sensation of growth isn't growth itself, that vection, both sensory and psychological, is comfort dressed as change. You can think you're moving when you're not. You can think you've changed when nothing has. You can live an entire life like that, spinning in place, forever convinced you're going somewhere. And that's the scariest illusion of all. You felt motion where there was none. Now prepare to hear something that never existed in the first place. Keep going. You're just beginning to lose your grip on what's real. What if I told you that your ears can lie, that you can hear things that were never spoken, not because of a hallucination, but because of how your brain interprets reality? You trust your senses. You believe that if you hear something, it must have been said. But that trust is flawed. That belief is dangerously naive. Take the phantom word illusion. A loop of meaningless syllables, let's say, kill bar repeated over and over, begins to sound like actual words. Not just any words, specific words. Different people hear different phrases, entirely dependent on what they expect, fear, or desire. One person might hear kill them. Another might swear they heard heal her, and both would be convinced the words were real. But they weren't. There were no real words, just noise. Your brain filled in the blanks. This isn't a glitch. It's how your perception works. Your brain is always predicting what should come next. It doesn't just record reality, it creates it. And that creation is based on context, emotion, memory. So what you hear is never just what's out there, it's what's in you. Now imagine what that means in everyday life. Someone says something ambiguous. Your partner, your boss, your friend. They mutter under their breath, or speak quickly, or say something loaded with subtext. You think you heard a threat, a judgment, a confession. But did they actually say it? Or did your mind, desperate for meaning, fabricate the message? And once you believe you heard it, once your mind commits, it's nearly impossible to go back. Your emotions kick in. You react not to what was said, but to what you think was said. An argument erupts. A relationship shifts. All because of a sentence that was never spoken. That's the horror. Perception becomes memory, and memory becomes truth. Now let's go deeper. In experiments, people have been played garbled audio clips that sound like nothing, but when shown a transcript beforehand, something like the Constitution Center is at the next stop, they suddenly hear the sentence clearly in the gibberish. Show them a different transcript, and they hear something else entirely. The noise doesn't change. Their interpretation does. Your expectations dictate your perception. You hear what you're primed to hear. You hear what confirms your beliefs, your fears, your worldview. And the more emotionally charged the context, the more distorted your hearing becomes. In other words, your ears aren't just antennas, they're filters. And those filters are soaked in bias. Think about political debates, family arguments, accusations and apologies. Think about how easy it is to hear contempt when someone's merely annoyed, to hear rejection in silence, to hear betrayal in hesitation. Now imagine what this does to justice, to memory, to history. If perception is this pliable, this easy to manipulate, how many confessions were misunderstood? How many insults were imagined? How many relationships, reputations, even lives have been destroyed because someone heard something that was never said? And the most disturbing part, you can't tell the difference. You can't rewind reality. You can't replay the moment without your brain's contamination. Once the words are heard, they've already shaped you. You're already changed how you see the person who said them. Even if you find out later that they never actually said it, the damage is done. The emotional truth sticks harder than the factual one. This is why misinformation spreads so fast, why rumors take hold, why gossip is almost impossible to erase. Because once you hear it, once it enters your perceptual framework, it's real to you. It becomes part of your internal narrative, and your narrative is what you live by. So what can you trust? If your ears can lie, your eyes can mislead, and your memories are warped, what's left? Awareness, not certainty. Not some magical immunity to illusion. Just the quiet, unsettling awareness that what you hear might not be what was said, that your perception is not a window, it's a mirror, reflecting not just the world, but your own mind, back at you. You can hear words that were never spoken, and if you don't pause to question them, you'll act on ghosts, fighting battles that never happened, punishing people for crimes they didn't commit, living in a world shaped not by truth, but by noise. Which raises the real question. If your ears can deceive you so easily, what else are they getting wrong? You think your senses are reliable. You think your perceptions are your own. But what if even your judgments about length, size, and scale aren't as accurate as they feel? Imagine walking into a room. Two lines are in front of you, one clearly shorter, one clearly longer. Yet, as people begin to point and whisper, something strange happens. They start insisting the shorter line is longer. At first, you laugh. They must be joking. But one by one, they speak with conviction, nodding seriously. You begin to doubt your own eyes. This isn't fiction. It's the Asch conformity experiment. Solomon Asch ran it in the 1950s, asking participants to identify which line matched a reference line. The correct answer was obvious, until everyone else in the room, all secretly actors, gave the wrong answer. The real subject, placed near the end, had to decide trust their senses or conform to the crowd. Again and again, people conformed. Over 70% gave the wrong answer at least once. They denied their own perception just to avoid standing out. Think about that. The fear of social isolation was stronger than the need for truth. But it gets worse. They weren't just pretending. Many believed the group was right. Their brains rewrote reality in real time. What they saw no longer matched what they believed. Their minds folded under pressure, not from violence, not from threats, but from the simple presence of consensus. Why? Because deep down we're wired to survive in groups. Loneliness once meant death. So we evolved a terrifying instinct to obey the crowd, even when the crowd is wrong, not because we're weak, but because we're human. And this instinct doesn't just apply to lines on paper. It applies to everything. Your values, your politics, your sense of morality, your understanding of truth. These can all be overwritten by the people around you, not because they reason with you, but because they agree with each other. The crowd isn't just persuasive, it's invasive. Once you're surrounded by belief, your own beliefs begin to morph. It's not conscious, you don't feel manipulated. But slowly, your confidence in your own judgment fades. The louder the crowd gets, the quieter your thoughts become. And it works both ways. You've likely been on the other side too, disagreeing silently, nodding publicly, just to avoid the sting of conflict. You rationalize it. It's not worth the fight. They wouldn't understand. I'll speak up next time. But every silent moment chips away at your integrity. The lie becomes a habit. The habit becomes a belief. Eventually, you forget the truth you once knew. This is how falsehood spreads, not with force, but with consensus. And here's the most unsettling part. The more absurd the belief, the more powerful the conformity. In one variation of Ager's experiment, researchers found that the higher the stakes, the stronger the urge to conform. When reality becomes unstable, people don't seek truth, they seek unity. That's why cults thrive. That's why propaganda works. That's why entire populations can believe the unbelievable. Because when enough people agree, disagreement feels like madness. So ask yourself, what do you believe because it's true, and what do you believe because others believe it? When you scroll through social media, are your opinions forming or being formed? When you watch the news, are you seeing facts or consensus? When your friends speak, are you listening or adjusting? The scariest part of this experiment isn't that people lie to fit in. It's that, given enough pressure, they stop knowing they're lying. Their minds bend, their perception fractures. Reality becomes a democracy, and truth a popularity contest. And the line, the one that was clearly shorter, it never changed. Only your mind did. So the next time everyone around you agrees, especially when it feels wrong, pause. Ask yourself, is this the truth, or is this just the louder voice? Because sometimes the only thing standing between you and a false reality is your refusal to nod. You think you're seeing clearly, but how much of what you see is still yours? You're about to find out, because the next step doesn't just show you a different opinion. It changes the frame entirely. And when the frame shifts, everything else goes with it. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to win an argument if you get to decide what the argument is about? Let me show you a trick. Imagine someone tells you people should be free to make their own choices. You nod. That feels right. But now imagine they use that statement to justify child labor. Suddenly, you're horrified. Not because the sentence changed, but because the frame did. Freedom of choice feels noble until it's weaponized to defend something vile. Same logic, different lens. And the truth, it flips completely. This is the dark magic of framing. Framing isn't just how you tell a story, it's how you define reality itself. It decides what details matter and what can be ignored. It makes villains look like heroes and turns heroes into fools. Consider this is a protester, a freedom fighter, or a public nuisance. That depends entirely on the frame. If the story is about injustice, they're brave. If the story is about disruption, they're a threat. The facts don't change, but the interpretation does. And we treat the interpretation as truth. Now think about the courtroom. A defense attorney might describe the accused as a struggling father trying to provide for his family. The prosecution might say he's a repeat offender who refuses to follow the law. Same person, same actions. Two frames, two realities. Framing manipulates emotion without changing information. It guides your attention. It tells you who to care about and what to believe. It makes certain facts feel bigger, louder, more real, even when they're not. Psychologists call this the framing effect, and it's one of the most powerful cognitive biases we have. Take a medical decision. Would you rather take a treatment that has a 90% survival rate, or one with a 10% death rate? They're the same, but one feels safer, the other feels risky. Why? Because the frame changed the emotional temperature of the truth. Advertisers do this constantly. A product isn't expensive, it's premium. A restaurant isn't crowded, it's popular. A delay isn't a failure, it's a safety measure. Every word is a choice. Every choice is a frame, and every frame reshapes what you think is true. Even science, for all its rigor, isn't immune. In one famous study, researchers showed people identical statistics about crime. One group saw it described as a beast ravaging a city. The other read it as a virus infecting a city. Those who read beast supported police crackdowns. Those who read virus supported social reform. Same data, different metaphor, radically different policies. This is why framing doesn't just affect perception, it alters consequence. It affects how we vote, what we fear, who we trust. It can justify cruelty or demand compassion. And often you don't even realize it's happening, because the most dangerous frames are invisible. They're baked into the structure of the question. They make the options feel limited, the debate feel binary. Think about how issues are presented. Are you pro-choice or pro-life? Are you for freedom or safety? These choices frame each other as opposites, even though life is rarely that simple. The frame narrows your field of vision. You think you're making a free decision, but you're choosing between two illusions. Now ask yourself, how many of your beliefs are framed before you even get to question them? It starts early. From the news you watch, the culture you absorb, the way your parents and teachers present the world. Every story has a frame. Every frame becomes a lens, and over time you stop seeing the glass. You think you're seeing the world as it is, but really you're seeing what someone else decided was important. This is why debates rarely change minds, because most people aren't arguing about facts. They're arguing from different frames, and unless those frames are challenged, the conversation goes nowhere. Two people can see the same event, say a police shooting, and walk away with opposite convictions. One sees a tragedy, the other sees justice. One frame sees danger, the other sees order, and neither one feels like a lie. But here's the real danger. When you realize framing is everywhere, you start to wonder, can you ever really know the truth? If every fact depends on context, and every context is manipulated, what's left to trust? This isn't just philosophical, it's psychological warfare. Framing is how power rewrites the rules. It's how institutions maintain control, how ideologies protect themselves, how narratives become self-fulfilling. And worst of all, it works even when you know it's happening. Changing the frame changes the truth. Yes, but more terrifying is this. The frame you're in might not even be yours. You inherited it, absorbed it, were conditioned to see through it. And until you recognize that, until you question not just what you believe, but how you came to believe it, you're not thinking freely. You're reacting inside someone else's design. So before you argue, before you choose, before you believe, ask yourself this. What's the frame? Who built it? And what truth is it hiding? Because if you don't ask those questions, someone else already answered them for you. You think you see the picture, but you're staring at the frame, and the longer you stare, the harder it is to remember. There's something beyond it. You've been told what to believe about reality. But what if your perception isn't broken, just limited by design? Keep going, because what you think is obvious might only make sense inside a story you didn't choose to believe. You're in a pitch-black room. No windows, no light, no landmarks. You hold up your hand in front of your face. You try to see it. You think you can, maybe just a faint outline, but you're not sure. There's no contrast, no boundary, no reference. Your hand could be a mile away or touching your nose, and your brain wouldn't know the difference. This isn't a riddle, it's a clue to something far more disturbing. You can't judge size without a reference. It sounds obvious, trivial, even, but peel it back. And this fact starts to eat through the way you understand the world. Everything you know is based on contrast. You know tall, only because you've seen short. You understand wealth only by witnessing poverty. Your entire framework for reality is comparative, not absolute. And that means without a reference point, your mind starts inventing one. This is why optical illusions work. Look at two circles, one surrounded by smaller circles, the other by larger ones. The central circles are the same size, but your brain insists one is bigger. Why? Because it's guessing, estimating, projecting reality based on surrounding cues. It's doing the best it can with limited information, and often it gets it wrong. But this isn't just about illusions. It's about your perception of everything. How rich are you? You don't calculate it objectively. You look around, you compare. Your $60,000 salary feels wealthy in a struggling neighborhood and pathetic on Wall Street. Nothing changed except the reference. How attractive are you? You compare yourself to filtered influencers, celebrities, and digitally sculpted fantasies. The standard isn't real, it's manufactured, but your brain treats it as the baseline. You feel small, not because you are, but because your measuring stick is broken. And this goes deeper, much deeper. Consider morality. You believe you're a good person, but how do you know? You judge yourself against people who are worse, against criminals, villains, monsters. You say, at least I'm not like them. But what happens when the people around you are even better, kinder, braver, more selfless? Suddenly, you feel inadequate. Not because you've changed, but because your reference did. Now ask, what if your references are manipulated? What if the images you see, the numbers you hear, the standards you're given, are all carefully chosen to shape how you feel? Advertisers know this. Politicians know this. Algorithms know this. They don't need to change who you are. They just need to control what you compare yourself to. This is how insecurity is manufactured. You're bombarded with exaggerated success stories, curated lifestyles, and idealized beauty. Not to inform you, but to recalibrate your reference point. You're not being educated. You're being shrunk. And here's where it gets even more twisted. Your brain does this to itself. In moments of doubt, you don't compare yourself to who you were last year. You compare yourself to who you think you should be, to a perfect version that doesn't exist, and then you punish yourself for not living up to it. That's the terrifying part. Your suffering is often self-inflicted by imaginary comparisons. And it doesn't stop. Consider fear. You're not afraid of flying because you've crashed. You're afraid because your brain compares it to a baseline of safety that was never promised. You're not afraid of dying because you understand death. You're afraid because you contrast it with the comfort of not thinking about it. Size, wealth, morality, beauty, risk, happiness. None of these are objective. All of them are constructed from contrast. And this means your reality isn't made of facts. It's made of frames. Frames that can be manipulated by others, by systems, and worst of all, by yourself. This is why people cling to routines, to social groups, to ideologies. They don't just seek truth, they seek reference, anchors. Because without them, the world feels like that pitch-black room. No up or down, no big or small, no right or wrong. Just floating, spinning, panicking. But here's the uncomfortable truth. There is no absolute reference, no fixed ruler for your life. Every measure you take is relative. Every feeling of success or failure, adequacy or shame, is shaped by the things you surround yourself with. Change your surroundings, change your perception. That's both your prison and your key. Because once you understand this, you can start to break the cycle. You can stop comparing and start defining, not by looking outward, but inward. By recognizing that most of what you feel isn't truth, it's context. You don't have to be the biggest in the room. You just have to realize the room is an illusion. You've been judging yourself against a distorted mirror. It's time to put it down. You'll never see clearly if your eyes are locked on someone else's reflection. Now, imagine what happens when even your memories start lying to you. Because next we'll explore what happens when people refuse to believe what they've seen with their own eyes. Even when the truth stares back at them, they deny it. Not because they're blind, but because their reference demands it. You're standing in a room with 10 people. They all see the same thing, something undeniable. A man walks in, shouts something aggressive, smashes a glass, then runs out. It's not subtle. It's not ambiguous. Everyone sees it. But when the police arrive and ask what happened, something strange begins to happen. One by one, people shrug. I didn't see anything. I'm not sure what I saw. Maybe he just tripped. And suddenly, this event, this clear, visceral moment, is rewritten in real time. This isn't fiction. It's not exaggeration. It's what happens when perception collides with pressure. We like to believe that seeing is believing, but the reality is far darker. People will deny seeing something that happened, even when it unfolded right in front of them. Why? Because truth isn't just about what you see. It's about what you're allowed to admit. This phenomenon has a name. Psychologists call it pluralistic ignorance, but its implications go far beyond jargon. It's the silent agreement that nobody wants to break, the invisible force that makes everyone pretend nothing is wrong because nobody wants to be the first to say something is. You've seen it happen. In a classroom, when a teacher says something wildly inappropriate and the room goes quiet, you wait for someone to object. No one does. So you start to wonder, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe you imagined it. At work, when someone crosses a line, makes a cruel joke, crosses a boundary, and everyone laughs nervously. No one wants to be the one who kills the mood. So you convince yourself you misunderstood. This isn't about cowardice. It's about survival. Admitting you saw something means taking a position, and taking a position means risking consequences. Social, emotional, even physical. So instead, you do what so many others do. You rewrite the memory. You erase the details. Until it becomes nothing. Until it becomes safe. But what if this behavior isn't an anomaly? What if it's the rule? There's a famous study where actors in a waiting room pretend not to react to smoke billowing in. The real subject, unaware of the setup, glances at the smoke, glances at the others, and decides if no one else is moving, then maybe there's no danger. Even as the room fills with smoke, even as panic would be the obvious response, they stay seated, paralyzed by the fear of standing out. We're not as independent as we think. We're not as brave as we imagine. Our minds are wired to defer to the group, to sacrifice what we see for what others accept. It's not weakness, it's evolution. Being wrong alone could get you killed. Being wrong together is survivable. And so slowly, truth becomes negotiable. This dynamic isn't just limited to bystander effects or social pressure. It's how entire atrocities are allowed to happen. Think of history's worst moments, not as acts of sudden evil, but as long, quiet denials. People saw things, heard things, knew things, but chose not to see, not to know, not to believe. It's how abusers remain protected in families. How institutions silence victims, how regimes normalize the horrific. The question isn't, why didn't anyone speak up? The question is, what did they have to lose by telling the truth? Because truth is costly, and denial is easy. But here's the cruelest part. Once you've denied something long enough, it becomes real. Not just socially, psychologically. The brain rewires itself to match the story you keep telling. It doesn't matter what your eyes saw. If your mouth keeps saying, nothing happened, eventually your mind follows. This isn't just self-protection, it's self-erasure. And the more often it happens, the harder it becomes to break. Until eventually, you don't just deny what you saw, you deny what you are. This is why silence is so dangerous. It doesn't just hide the truth, it reshapes it. It takes something real and makes it disappear. Not with force, not with lies, but with absence. So next time you're tempted to stay quiet, to blend in, to pretend you didn't see what you saw, ask yourself this: what version of reality are you helping create? Because every time you say nothing, you choose the illusion over the truth. And illusions, no matter how comforting, always come with a cost. Especially when you start to believe them. You've seen it, you've felt it. Now ask yourself, what else have you forgotten, simply because no one else remembered? And just like that, the next moment begins, where what you see may not even be yours anymore. Where even your next decision might already be decided by an image you barely noticed. Keep watching. It's already happening. You're walking down a hallway. On the wall there's a painting, abstract, crimson and jagged. You glance at it for a second, maybe two. It doesn't feel important. But later, when you're asked whether a random face seems trustworthy, you hesitate. You don't know why, but something about the eyes seems off. Cold, dishonest. That painting, it changed your answer. Your decisions shift based on the last image you saw. This isn't just some quirky psychological trick. It's a profound, invisible lever that pulls your mind in ways you almost never notice. And it's happening constantly. Priming, that's the term psychologists use. One simple exposure, an image, a word, a sound, can alter the way you think, feel, and decide. It's like slipping colored glasses over your perception without your permission. A warm photo of a family around a dinner table makes you rate strangers as kinder. A picture of a gun, it makes you perceive neutral expressions as more aggressive. Your brain doesn't tell you it's being influenced. It simply shifts beneath the surface, whispering false confidence into your choices. You think you're rational, but you're just responding to cues you're not even aware exist. Now imagine this power scaled. Advertisers know it. Politicians thrive on it. Media weaponizes it. They don't need to convince you with logic. They just need to show you something right before you decide. A crying child. A flag waving in slow motion. A photo of someone just like you, or not like you at all. These are not decorations, they are tools, and you're the target. Consider a study. Participants shown the American flag before answering political questions became significantly more conservative, just from the image. Another study. People primed with cleanliness-related words acted more judgmentally toward moral transgressions. Words, not arguments. Not debates. Just words flashed quickly enough to escape conscious notice. You don't need to understand the stimulus for it to work. That's the danger. Your unconscious mind takes it in, builds connections, alters moods, then hands off the results to your conscious mind, dressed up like a logical decision. But it wasn't logic. It was a ghost. Think of jury trials. A defendant wears a suit. He seems responsible. Add a photo of the crime scene, gory and visceral, and suddenly the same testimony feels more damning. It's not just about what you hear, it's about what you see right before you decide. Now look around you. Think of your news feed, your TikTok scroll, your Instagram Explore page. Think of the last movie trailer you watched. The last political post you paused on, the last image that made you feel something, anger, fear, love, pride. Did you decide what came next? Or did the image decide for you? Because this doesn't just influence small choices. It shapes values, biases, votes, beliefs. You can be nudged into distrust, into fear, into compliance, and you'll never know it happened. It's how fear-based propaganda works. Not with arguments, but with images. Flash a mugshot, flash a riot, flash a foreign flag. And now, suddenly, your vote has rationale. But it wasn't a belief, it was an infection. And here's the most disturbing part. Your awareness of the effect doesn't protect you from it. Knowing that an image might bias your decision doesn't stop your brain from doing exactly what it's evolved to do: assimilate environmental cues to predict outcomes. This is why courtroom psychologists warn even experienced judges about the color of ties, the lighting in mugshots, the framing of stories, priming slips beneath judgment. It lives in instinct. Your choices, where to eat, who to trust, what to believe, aren't choices. They're shadows of stimuli you didn't even know you absorbed. It's not about weakness. It's about how human perception works. You are built to be influenced, designed for suggestion. Every moment, your mind is writing stories, filling gaps, adjusting dials. And the last thing you saw, it's often the hand on the dial. So what now? Should you close your eyes, shut down your screens, flee from influence? No, that's not possible. But you can learn to pause. Before you judge, pause. Before you decide, ask yourself, what did I just see? What feeling did it trigger? Is this me? Really me? Or just the echo of someone else's design? Because the more you understand the tricks, the harder they are to play on you. You may never be free from influence, but you can learn to recognize its touch. And once you do, the world looks different. Less like a story you're passively told, and more like a theater you've just caught in the act. If they can sway your mind with an image, imagine what else they can do. You'll want to see what comes next, but you won't like how it makes you feel. Because the next manipulation doesn't require lies, it just needs authority, and you've already been trained to listen. Imagine being ordered to hurt someone and obeying, not because you're evil, not because you want to, but because someone in a white lab coat told you to. This isn't fiction. This is the Milgram experiment, one of the most disturbing studies in the history of psychology. Participants believed they were helping test a learner's memory. Each time the learner made a mistake, they were instructed to administer an electric shock. The shock started mild, but increased to levels labeled danger, severe shock. The twist: the learner wasn't real. The screams, the begging, the silence, it was all an act, but the participant didn't know that. And what did they do? Most obeyed, even when the learner pounded on the walls, even when they stopped responding entirely, even when they feared they'd killed someone. They kept going. Why? Because a man in a lab coat said, "The experiment requires that you continue." That single sentence overrode guilt, fear, and basic human empathy. People obeyed authority, even when it tore apart their conscience, even when they hated what they were doing. This wasn't about sadism, it was about obedience. And it wasn't rare, it was horrifyingly normal. The Milgram experiment revealed something most of us refuse to believe: that ordinary people, when placed in a system of authority, will do extraordinary harm just to avoid conflict with that authority. This wasn't about monsters, it was about mechanisms, psychological levers that bypass morality. Authority isn't just a position, it's a force, one that rewires the way we think, feel, and act. Obedience is trained into us. From childhood, we're taught that disobedience is dangerous, that challenging rules is wrong, that authority is to be respected, trusted, and feared. That order matters more than conscience. So when someone powerful tells us to act, we listen, even if our stomach twists, even if we hate every second. We obey, because we've been conditioned to fear the consequences of disobedience more than the consequences of harm. And the more official the authority appears, badges, titles, uniforms, the stronger the obedience becomes. Even when authority is clearly immoral, it doesn't lose its power. In fact, its power becomes more seductive, because it offers us a way to offload guilt, to say, "I was just following orders." That phrase has echoed through history, from soldiers in war crimes to bureaucrats in genocides, from prison guards to cult members. "I was just following orders" becomes the final escape from accountability. But it's a lie, a dangerous one, because even when we follow orders, the blood is still on our hands. The most terrifying thing about obedience isn't that it happens. It's that it happens in people like us. People who swear we'd never hurt anyone. People who think we're too moral, too ethical, too conscious. That illusion, that we're immune, is exactly what makes us vulnerable. You can hate what you're doing. You can know it's wrong and still do it. That's what Milgram showed us. Obedience doesn't erase guilt. It just buries it deep inside until you forget how to think for yourself, until you mistake compliance for virtue, until you're so used to obeying that disobedience feels like a threat to your identity. But what if you refused? What if, just once, you said no? That single act, defiance, breaks the cycle. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Authority is only as powerful as our willingness to obey it. You may not wear a uniform. You may not stand in a lab, but every day you're given choices. Choices to comply, to conform, to look away, or to question, to resist, to reclaim your conscience from the systems trying to hijack it. You can hate what you're doing and still do it, but you don't have to. You can break the spell. You just have to decide that obedience is not always a virtue, because sometimes the most moral act is to disobey, especially when everyone else is following orders, even if it costs you, especially if it costs you. You've been told that good people obey, but maybe, just maybe, the good ones are the ones who refuse. You'll want to believe you'd never fall for it, that you'd never press the button, never give the shock. But before you believe that, ask yourself one question. What would you do if the man in the lab coat told you to? You won't like the answer, and that's exactly why you need to hear it. You think you're safe just because you hate it. Hating it changes nothing if you still obey. What else have you missed just because someone told you to look away? Because next, something might be hiding right in front of you. Imagine walking into a room, brightly lit, silent. Nothing seems out of place. But something is, you just can't see it yet. Your brain fills in the blanks. It assumes what should be there instead of what actually is. Maybe a chair moved slightly. Maybe the shadow under the door isn't quite right. You blink and shrug it off. But that tiny inconsistency, that overlooked detail might be everything. This isn't just about forgetfulness. It's about perception. And perception, disturbingly, is not reality. It's a filtered simulation. Your brain builds every millisecond based on what it thinks matters. Welcome to the phenomenon of inattentional blindness. This is the cognitive glitch that makes you miss a gorilla walking through a basketball game. Literally. That's not a metaphor. In a famous experiment, people asked to count basketball passes often failed to notice a person in a full gorilla suit walk across the screen, stop, and beat their chest. Half the participants didn't see it at all. Why? Because the mind wasn't looking for it. It wasn't part of the task. The gorilla existed, but in a psychological sense, it didn't. This is the terrifying truth about your awareness. You don't see what's there, you see what you expect. What your brain decides is relevant. Everything else becomes invisible. But here's where it gets darker. If you can miss something as obvious as a gorilla, what else might you be missing? What dangers, what lies, what patterns? Now imagine how this applies in the real world, outside the lab. You walk down the street, see a homeless person on the corner, and your mind blurs their presence. Not out of cruelty, but habit. You're focused on your errands, your texts, your thoughts. They become part of the background. You don't see them. And because you don't see them, they don't exist to you. At least, not fully. This isn't just individual oversight, it's societal blindness. Whole systems are built on what people fail to notice. Injustice hides in plain sight. Exploitation parades itself as normalcy. When the majority isn't looking, the minority suffers silently. And here's the most unsettling part. You feel like you're paying attention. That's the trap. The illusion of awareness is more powerful than awareness itself. You believe you're conscious, awake, observant. But in truth, you only see a sliver. A fraction. You live inside a perceptual tunnel, convinced it's a wide open field. The implications are staggering. How many decisions have you made based on partial data? How many moments have you misread because your brain filtered out the rest? Think about memory, about relationships, about moments of regret. How many arguments started because you missed a facial expression, a pause, a tremble in someone's voice? How many opportunities slipped past because your attention was locked elsewhere? And it doesn't stop at what you ignore. It includes what you fabricate. When you miss something, your brain doesn't admit the gap. It fills it in. It manufactures detail, context, even emotion. You trust these illusions. You bet your life on them. Every day. This is the unsettling duality of perception. You trust your senses completely, even when they're lying to you. And the system loves that. Governments, advertisers, influencers, they all thrive on your limited attention. They know that if they distract you just enough, you'll miss what matters. The real decision happening off-screen. The critical law passed quietly. The deeper implication behind a polished headline. The world doesn't hide its horrors, it just buries them in noise. You scroll, swipe, double tap, and keep moving. And each flick of the thumb rewires your attention span, teaching your brain to favor novelty over depth, speed over clarity. You're being trained to miss things, not by accident, by design, but it's not hopeless. The first step is knowing how blind you really are, not metaphorically, literally. Every moment of your life is a negotiation between reality and your brain's guesswork. When you understand this, you begin to question everything. What else have you missed? What truth was right in front of you that you filtered out because it was uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unfamiliar? It's not the absence of truth that should terrify you. It's your brain's ability to erase it. So pay closer attention, not just to what you see, but to what you don't. Because the greatest manipulations don't hide in shadows, they hide in plain sight. And the cost of missing them. That's a story you may never realize you're living. You don't need to be scared of what you can't see. You need to be scared of what you'll never notice you missed. Because the moment you realize how much you've already overlooked, you'll never look at your own mind the same way again. Maybe you're not losing memories. Maybe they were never fully there to begin with. Maybe what you call the past is already being rewritten by sound. You're standing in your childhood bedroom. The wallpaper's faded. The light hits the floor just like it used to. But something feels off. The memories you're reliving aren't quite right. They're too soft, too edited. The corners of pain have been sanded down. The joy is exaggerated. The silence between moments seems louder than it ever did, and playing faintly in the background. Music, that's not just nostalgia. That's neurological manipulation. When you hear music during a memory, you're not just remembering the past, you're remembering it through the music. The soundtrack becomes the filter, the emotional lens through which the memory rewrites itself. And it does rewrite itself. Every single time. See, memory isn't a hard drive. It's a living script, rewritten every time you access it. Each time you recall a moment, you don't remember the original. You remember the last time you remembered it. And music, with its emotional saturation and rhythmic hooks, doesn't just accompany that memory, it alters it. A song you once heard while falling in love makes the memory warmer, more cinematic. But here's the twist. If you later hear that same song after heartbreak, the warmth is overwritten. The same memory now carries a completely different emotional payload. The past has been revised, and it's not just dramatic moments, even mundane memories, like walking home from school or folding laundry, get coated in the emotional varnish of whatever music was playing. You don't even notice it happening, but the memory changes all the same. Psychologists call this affective tagging. Music tags memories with emotion. But these tags aren't passive. They become part of the memory's DNA. And over time, they influence how you interpret your own story. This is why a song can bring you to tears years later, not because of the melody itself, but because it unlocks a version of your past you no longer recognize. Or worse, one that never truly happened. Because memory doesn't care about accuracy. It cares about coherence, about emotional logic, about narrative. And music is the master manipulator of narrative. Film directors know this. Advertisers know this. Even cult leaders know this. They use music not just to stir emotion in the moment, but to rewrite how you remember that moment afterward. A lullaby at a funeral, an upbeat anthem during indoctrination, a tragic chord progression during a product reveal. You think you're remembering your life, but often you're remembering the music that was playing when you lived it. And here's where it gets darker, because this isn't just about what you remember, it's about what you forget. Music can erase by romanticizing trauma. It can soften the brutality. By glamorizing heartbreak, it can blur the abuse. You tell yourself it wasn't so bad. After all, you smiled during that road trip. You laughed at that party. You danced, didn't you? Yes, but only because the music told you to. And so you reframe the betrayal as a chapter in a love story. The isolation as artistic solitude. The humiliation as a rite of passage. You reinterpret your life as a curated soundtrack, and in doing so, you lose the raw, unscored reality of it. You're not the only one. Entire generations attach their identities to playlists. We define ourselves not by what happened, but by how we musically remember what happened. And that means our collective memory is being shaped, edited, scored, distorted by what we listen to. Even memory therapy has started using music. Alzheimer's patients can sometimes recall lost memories when a familiar song is played. It's powerful, beautiful, but also revealing, because it shows how memory isn't just stored in the brain, it's stored in emotion. And music is the emotion factory. So what does this mean for you? It means that your past is more malleable than you think. That the soundtrack you've chosen or had chosen for you has shaped not just your feelings, but your identity. Who you are is in part who the music told you to be. The tragedy you remember might be someone else's song. The joy you cling to might be an illusion spun by melody. And the pain you've buried might still be trapped in the minor chords of a tune you can't bear to hear. You think you know your past, But until you ask yourself what music was playing, you don't really know what you're remembering. And once you realize that, the question isn't just what happened, it's who wrote the soundtrack. Maybe your memories aren't yours after all, and if that's true, what else might you be wrong about? You hear that? It's still playing, quietly, but it's there. You're not done yet. Because if your past was this easy to rewrite, how secure is your present? Stay with this feeling. Because the next truth isn't easier, it's harder. You're about to see something you've always felt, but never said out loud. Have you ever tried to imagine the world without yourself in it? Not just dying, not just being forgotten, but never having existed at all. Try it. Imagine the sky without your eyes to see it. Imagine a joke, never told, because your voice never formed. Imagine the people you've touched, their lives folding differently, as if your fingerprint was never there. But here's the twist, you can't, not really, because every time you attempt it, some version of you creeps back in, maybe as an observer, maybe as a phantom, maybe as a thought that someone else might remember you. But that ghost, that's still you. You are the lens, you are the narrator, you are the only constant in your own experience of reality. This isn't just poetic, it's neurological. Your brain constructs the world around a central axis. From the first moment of consciousness, your identity becomes the reference point for everything. Even your memories are biased, reshaped over time to make you the protagonist of every story. And what does that mean? It means you're trapped inside your own perspective. Everywhere you look, you are there, even when you try to disappear. Think about dreams. You can dream of flying, of dying, of being someone else entirely, but the dream is still being had by you. The illusion might shift, but the experiencer remains. You are the anchor that refuses to lift. This is solipsism, not as a philosophy, but as a lived condition. You don't just live in the world. The world for you lives inside your mind. And here's the disturbing part. You can't turn it off. Even in altruism, even in self-sacrifice, there is a trace of self, a desire to be good, to matter, to be remembered. Your ego is a master of disguise. It will wear the mask of humility. It will hide inside your virtues. It survives even in the desire to disappear. Now ask yourself, when you help others, who are you really helping? Or the version of yourself that wants to be seen as helpful? This isn't cynicism. This is psychological architecture. We are wired this way. The self is not optional. It is default, automatic, total. That's why death terrifies you. Not just the end of sensation, but the idea that the entire universe disappears with you. Because, as far as you can truly perceive, it does. When you're gone, everything goes. Light, sound, love, memory, snuffed out in a single blink. You are not just afraid of dying. You are afraid that everything only exists because you are here to observe it. And in a way, you're right. That's why it's so hard to grasp other people's inner worlds. You know intellectually that they exist, but emotionally, viscerally, it's like staring at a photograph and being told it's alive. You try to imagine their fears, their thoughts, their sleepless nights. But it all loops back. It all becomes a mirror. Even your empathy is self-referential. You feel what you would feel in their situation. You feel what you would feel in their situation. You aren't stepping into their mind. You're dragging them into yours. This is the quiet prison of consciousness. A beautiful, intricate cell with no door. You don't just live in your mind. You are your mind. And every attempt to escape, it leads you in a circle back to you. So what do you do with that? How do you live in a world where you are both the observer and the observed, the dreamer and the dream? You become aware of it. You stop pretending you're objective. You stop pretending you're separate from what you see. Because once you realize you are the frame, you can stop being fooled by the picture. The illusion is not that the world exists. The illusion is that you're ever outside of it. You never were, and you never will be. And maybe, just maybe, that's the key to humility, not in denying your existence, but in realizing that everything you touch, think, and feel is stained with your presence. You can't picture the world without yourself in it, because for you, there is no world without you. But what if someone else saw you the same way? What if their entire world bent and broke, depending on how they imagined you? Keep watching, because the person you think you are may not even be real in someone else's mind. Imagine you're meeting someone new, not just bumping into them at the store, but really sitting down, looking them in the eyes, and trying to figure out who they are. What do you ask first? Where are you from? What do you do? What's your biggest regret? Each question pulls a different thread, and depending on which one you choose, you end up with a different version of the same person. That's not a glitch in perception. It's the blueprint of human understanding. We don't see people as they are. We see them through the lens of the questions we ask. If you ask someone about their job, you'll learn about their role, their skills, maybe their ambition. If your one's question, as sudden about a childhood memory, and suddenly you're handed vulnerability, trauma, longing, same person. Two different portraits, just from changing the question. Because questions are not neutral, they're surgical instruments. They cut into someone's identity and extract what's closest to the surface or buried far beneath it. Ask someone, what makes you angry? And they'll hand you a mask. Ask them, what makes you feel small? And the mask starts to crack. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. You start to realize how easily people can be manipulated, not by force, but by framing. Change the question, and you change the story. Change the story, and you change the person. In courtrooms, in therapy, in politics, this is the quiet art of control. Frame the question to get the answer you want. Guide the narrative. Direct the spotlight, not with facts, but with focus. A prosecutor asks, "Why did you do it?" and already assumes guilt. A therapist asks, "When did you start to feel this way?" and invites introspection. The question itself carries moral weight, psychological pressure, a gravitational pull towards certain truths and away from others. And here's the terrifying part. People usually comply, not because they're lying, but because they're desperate to be understood. They mold themselves to fit the shape of the question, not realizing they're becoming someone else in the process. It happens in everyday life too. Think about job interviews, first dates, social media bios. The questions come loaded with expectations, and we contort ourselves to meet them. We answer the question we think is being asked, not just with words, but with identity. Over time, the questions we're asked most frequently become internalized. You start asking them of yourself. Am I successful enough? Am I desirable? Am I normal? And then you start living in service of those questions, not realizing how much of you gets left out. Because no one ever asked, what part of yourself have you hidden to survive? People aren't mirrors, they're prisms. And the question is the light that passes through. Shift the angle, and a different color appears. Now imagine a world where that power is weaponized, where media asks leading questions to shape public opinion, where politicians frame every issue to divide, to distract, to dominate, where advertisers ask, "What are you insecure about?" and then build an entire economy around your answer. And beneath all that, at the most personal level, someone asks you, "Are you okay?" You say yes, because it's easier, because it's what's expected, because the real answer would take too long to explain. But deep down, another question haunts you. What if the person I've become is just a reflection of the questions I've been forced to answer? You begin to wonder if you've ever truly been yourself, or if you've just been performing, bending and twisting in response to the curiosity of others. And the scariest realization, it's not that the same person can look different based on the question asked. It's that maybe there is no same person at all, just fragments, roles, masks, held together by the temporary illusion of consistency. You are who you say you are, until someone asks you something new, and then you change again. You can feel it now, can't you? That quiet uncertainty crawling under your skin, not just about others, but about yourself. Because if you're built from answers, and those answers depend on the questions, then who exactly is asking? And who exactly are you? You're not as fixed as you thought. None of us are. We are the sum of what we've been asked and what we've chosen to reveal. So be careful what you ask of others, and be even more careful of what you allow others to ask of you. Because some questions don't just uncover truth, they rewrite it. And if you're not paying attention, you won't even notice it happening until there's nothing left of the person you thought you were. You're not done unraveling, because what happens next isn't about what you see, it's about what your brain believes it sees. And it's already lying to you. Stay with it. You're staring at a still image, a pattern of alternating black and white dots. You know it's static. Nothing's moving. And yet, your brain tells a different story. The edges pulse. The lines shimmer. The whole thing seems to ripple like it's alive. What just happened? Your brain lied to you, but not by accident, by design. The brain adds motion where there is none. Why? Because motion to your brain is more important than accuracy. Think back thousands of years when survival depended on detecting a predator creeping through tall grass. Your ancestors didn't have time for careful deliberation. A flicker, a blur, anything that resembled motion had to be interpreted as movement. If they were wrong, they jumped at shadows. If they were right, they lived. The brain was wired for speed, not truth. It still is. You see it today in optical illusions like the rotating snakes or the enigma illusion, completely still images that appear to move. Your eyes aren't broken. Your vision isn't glitching. Your brain is simply overriding the data. It decides what's probably happening and fills in the rest. It's a prediction machine, constantly guessing what comes next before the information even arrives. This is called predictive coding. Your brain builds a model of the world and then adjusts it based on sensory input. But the model comes first. You see what you expect to see, not what's actually there. Motion is one of the areas where this becomes most obvious. The brain assumes that if something looks like it could move, it probably is. This shortcut keeps you safe, responsive, alert, but it also means your perception of reality is at best a well-informed hallucination. And here's where things get unsettling. The brain doesn't just add motion to pictures, it adds motion to people. You walk into a room and see someone shift slightly. A glance, a step, a twitch, your brain fills in the blanks. Were they moving toward you? Away? Did their body language change? Are they a threat? Are they interested? You're not seeing them clearly. You're seeing your expectation of them, animated by your own subconscious predictions. It's the same when you're watching someone across a crowded room. A slight lean forward, and suddenly you're convinced they're walking your way. That's your brain, adding narrative, direction, intention, to a moment that might have meant nothing. Now think about how easily that illusion breaks people. Paranoia, jealousy, misunderstandings, all rooted in false motion. Your brain projecting actions, motives, threats where none exist. How many arguments have started because someone thought they saw someone do something? But the illusion doesn't stop at motion. It bleeds into memory, because what your brain thinks it saw, it also thinks it remembers. You look back at that moment, and the fake motion is still there. It becomes part of your story. They walked toward me. They pulled away. They flinched when I entered. Real memories built on hallucinated motion. You trust your brain because you have to, but it doesn't always serve you. In fact, it betrays you constantly because your survival has never depended on truth. It's depended on certainty. And motion gives your brain the illusion of certainty. If something's moving, something's happening. And if something's happening, you better respond. The tragedy is that this same evolutionary mechanism that once kept you alive now leads you to misread the world, to imagine conflict, to distrust those around you, based on flickers and shadows. The brain adds motion to protect you. But in the modern world, that protection often backfires. So what do? Do you stop trusting what you see? Do you doubt your instincts? Do you second-guess every twitch, every glance? No. You just remember that perception is not truth. It's a sketch, often brilliant, sometimes beautiful, but never the real thing. Because when you start seeing how often your brain gets it wrong, you begin to realize something even more disturbing. You've never truly seen the world as it is, only as your brain needs it to be. And if motion can be added where none exists, what else is being added? What else have you accepted as real that never was? You can keep pretending you're in control, or you can accept what your brain doesn't want you to know. It's not that the image was moving, it's that you were. And you still are, even now, as your mind tries to hold still. If your own eyes can't be trusted, what happens when your mood starts bending reality itself? Keep watching. You're about to find out. You're walking down the same street you've walked 100 times, the same houses, the same signs, the same people, but something feels different. Not in what you see, but in how it feels. The dog that barked at you yesterday now seems friendly. The cloudy sky that once felt heavy now seems serene. Nothing has changed, but everything has changed, because your mood just rewrote reality. Scientists have uncovered something unsettling about perception. It's not objective. It's not stable. And it's not even consistent from one moment to the next. Your brain doesn't just receive data from your senses. It edits it, filters it, colors it. And one of the most powerful filters, your mood, think about it. When you're anxious, the world looks dangerous. Neutral faces seem suspicious. Normal events feel like threats. But when you're happy, even chaos feels manageable. You're more likely to trust strangers, take risks, and forgive mistakes. Same events, same stimuli, entirely different world. Because you're not seeing the world as it is, you're seeing it as you are. Researchers have shown that emotional states can warp memory. In a bad mood, you remember that argument as more intense. That insult cuts deeper in hindsight. In a good mood, you might not even remember. It happened. Your brain reconstructs the past, not as it was, but as it fits your current emotion. And it's not just memory. Your literal visual perception shifts with your mood. Sad people see colors as more muted. Depressed individuals interpret neutral expressions as hostile. Your brain isn't just lying to you, it's lying for you, tailoring the world to match your inner state, whether you like it or not. Here's the terrifying part. This means you can't trust your own senses, not always. You could watch someone speak, hear every word clearly, and walk away remembering them as angry, judgmental, cold, simply because your mood was off. You didn't mishear. You missaw, misfelt, misinterpreted. And no one around you would even notice. This distortion isn't a malfunction. It's a survival mechanism. Your brain evolved to prioritize relevance over accuracy. If you're scared, it assumes danger is nearby. If you're angry, it assumes opposition. It warps perception to fit your emotional forecast, like weather radar that changes the map depending on how you feel about the rain. But what happens when that system backfires? When you're stuck in a negative loop? When anxiety feeds paranoia? Paranoia warps perception, and warped perception reinforces anxiety. You're not just feeling bad. You're living in a hallucinated version of reality, one crafted by your own mind, where every glance feels like judgment, every silence like rejection. You can become a prisoner in a world your brain invented, and it gets worse. You can also misremember your own actions. People in negative moods are more likely to believe they caused events they didn't, that they said things they never did, that they were the problem, even when they weren't. It's not guilt, it's perception. You're watching a distorted replay of your own life, and you believe it because it feels real. This is why conflict feels so unresolvable sometimes. Two people experience the same moment and walk away with completely different truths. Not because someone is lying, but because both are telling the truth as they experienced it through the lens of their mood. So what does this mean for reality? It means your emotional state isn't just a background condition, it's an active participant in constructing your world. It means that what you think you saw, what you think you heard, might be nothing more than your mood whispering in your ear. And if you've ever been in a depressive spiral, you already know this. You remember the feeling that people were ignoring you, judging you, mocking you. You remember interpreting every text message as rejection. You felt sure of it. You were convinced, but later, sometimes much later, you looked back and realized none of it was real, except it was. Because when your brain tells you something's real, you live as though it is. This isn't meant to make you paranoid, it's meant to wake you up, to remind you that your brain isn't a mirror, it's a painter, and your mood holds the brush. Sometimes it paints paradise, sometimes it paints hell, and the scariest part, you don't know which one you're living in until the mood changes and the painting shifts beneath your feet. You never really saw the world, you saw yourself projected onto everything around you. So next time you're sure someone hates you, that the world is falling apart, that you've made a catastrophic mistake, pause. Ask yourself, is this the world talking to me? Or is it just me talking to myself through the walls of my mind? Because your mood doesn't just shape how you feel, it shapes what you believe you saw. And when perception is this malleable, reality becomes a fragile, flickering flame. You can't afford to look away. You've started to wonder whether your own voice can be trusted. But what happens when you remember saying things that never left your lips, and the world insists they did? Keep going. You're closer than you think. You've probably had this argument before. I said that. No, you didn't. Two people, two memories utterly incompatible, and yet both are sure, not guessing, not unsure, absolutely convinced. So someone must be wrong, right? But what if no one is lying? What if no one even remembers lying? Welcome to one of the strangest phenomena in cognitive science, false memory implantation. It sounds like science fiction, but it's real, and it happens more often than you think. In the 1990s, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus began a series of experiments that would make her one of the most controversial figures in modern psychology. She showed that not only can you remember things that didn't happen, you can believe you said things you never did. And once that false memory takes root, it becomes almost impossible to tell it apart from truth. Let's break this. Memory isn't a video recorder. It doesn't store everything you see and hear with perfect fidelity. It's a story you're constantly editing, patching up, and rewriting. Each time you recall something, your brain reconstructs it from scratch, like rebuilding a sandcastle every time the tide comes in. And here's the problem. Every rebuild opens the door for error, for suggestion, for distortion. In Loftus's studies, participants were told they had once been lost in a mall as a child, a totally fabricated story. Within a few sessions, many of them not only believed it had happened, they filled in details: the smell of the store, the feeling of panic, the kind stranger who brought them back. The brain doesn't just accept the lie, it decorates it. Now imagine applying that same psychological mechanism to something even more intimate. Your own speech. You're told gently and repeatedly that you said something. A phrase, an insult, a confession. At first, you deny it. You don't remember, but over time, the pressure builds, the narrative forms. And then it happens, you recall it. A memory that never existed becomes as vivid as any truth you've ever known. You don't just believe it, you feel it, own it, defend it. That's the horror, because it means your own memories can be hacked without your awareness. Not just what you did, but what you think you said, who you think you are. And the deeper you look, the worse it gets. We're not just talking about suggestion from psychologists. Everyday life is full of cues that alter your memory. Authority figures, repetition, social pressure, each acts like a chisel carving new grooves in your brain. A teacher insists you admitted cheating. A parent swears you confessed. A partner tells you that during the fight, you crossed a line and you're not sure anymore. You remember being upset. You remember shouting. Could you have said it? The memory forms, blurry at first, then sharpens until it feels real. But it never happened. Now here's the twist. This doesn't make you weak or gullible. It makes you human. Every person is susceptible, even you, especially you, because your brain is designed to value coherence over accuracy. It wants your past to make sense. It wants your identity to feel stable, so it fills gaps with whatever fits. And if that means inserting a fake confession, a false quote, a fabricated outburst, so be it. And once implanted, false memories are stubborn. You can't just delete them. You can't reason them away, because your emotions start to attach themselves. You feel shame, or guilt, or pride. And those emotions reinforce the memory, making it harder to distinguish from reality. This isn't just a glitch. It's a vulnerability, a soft spot in the human operating system. And it's been used by cults, interrogators, even therapists. Not maliciously at first. But the line is thin. Think of recovered memory therapy in the 80s and 90s. Patients came to believe they had said and done unspeakable things, things that destroyed families and lives, because someone with authority gently guided them toward memories that didn't exist. The brain complied, it constructed the lie, and it hurt everyone involved. But it doesn't take a therapist to implant a false memory. Just enough pressure, enough repetition, enough time. So next time you argue with someone about something you said, pause. Are you sure, or have you? Without knowing, been rewritten. And more chilling, what else do you believe about yourself that might not be real at all? Because if you can believe you said something you never did, what else might you confess to, apologize for, or carry guilt over, that was never yours to begin with? You can't trust everything your mind hands you. But you also can't stop listening to it. And in that gap between doubt and certainty, someone else can slip in. Not with force, but with suggestion. Not with violence, but with persuasion. And once the memory takes hold, you will defend it. Even to your grave. Because now it's not just a memory, it's part of who you think you are. You think this was disturbing. You haven't even scratched the surface of what your own brain is willing to hide from you. Keep going. What comes next will feel like it knows you a little too well.